Y'all are pushing. Y'all are
No, wait till you see what the percentage is. This is what they want.
Good evening, and welcome to the Monday, August 19th, Richmond City School Board meeting. Madam Clerk.
So the board members who are present, please respond. Ms. Jewell? Here. Mr. Barlow?
Here.
Ms. Dixon?
Here.
Mr. Young?
Here.
Mrs. Burke? Here. Ms. Cosby? Ms. Owen?
Here.
Dr. Sapini? Mrs. Page?
Here.
Form, Madam Chair. We do have an interpreter this evening.
Ross, yes. Thank you. Next item.
The next item is the adoption of the agenda after having any changes this evening, Madam Chair. Do you?
Need a motion? Ms. Burke. Madam Chair, I move that we accept the agenda as stated.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Burke and seconded by Ms. Owen to approve the minutes. The agenda as received. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Since we don't have any opposition, the agenda has been approved as presented.
Next item on the agenda is 1.03 to approve the minutes of the August 5th, 2019 board meeting. Those minutes were distributed earlier for your review and they have been posted to board docs.
Need a motion?
I emailed earlier today about a couple of changes.
And the changes have been reflected. Oh, yeah. Okay. So the minutes can be referred. What is the board's pleasure, or either we can approve with the clerk making the corrections, or we can defer. What is the board's pleasure? Defer to the clerk.
For the minutes or?
Okay. Next item.
The next item is item 2, public information. I have 2 speakers who signed up in advance. What is your pleasure, Madam Chair?
Call the speakers that have signed up in advance. And if we have other members in the audience that would like to speak, come forward after the persons that have signed up. If you're speaking as an individual, you have 3 minutes. If you're speaking on behalf of an organization, you have 5 minutes. Sign in and state your name.
Donna Seymour.
Chairwoman Page, Vice Chair Dorr, Superintendent Hamlet, school board members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. And it's with great pleasure for me to be presenting a couple of students that have done some amazing work this week, this time. I want to begin with giving you a little bit of background. They're presenting.
Seymour, if you could sign in and
I
state.
did. I know
State your name.
I did it ahead of time. Just I can start.
Please state your name for the record, however. Thank you.
Donna Seymour.
Thank you, Susan.
And I'm speaking on behalf of LULAC. They will be presenting on behalf of the Mayor's Youth Academy. So the background, representing the Palante Technology Center, the LULAC Palante Technology Center. And this is something that was born, it was, the motivation is because of the findings that, we found at the conclusion of the board driving greens grant cycle, 2017, 2019. But what really, ignited the urgency was last year in October, the Virginia Department of Education, published a report where, Richmond Public Schools has a 60% dropout rate and 38% graduation rate among Latinos. And I'm sorry, that's just unacceptable. What we learned at the conclusion from assessments with parents, home visits, other students, and individual assessments with bilingual counselors, we learned that the students in the program performed at below average levels of language proficiency and reading comprehension. And we also learned that it's very upsetting. There seems to be an unwritten policy of Spanish only. And where students were told that English only, I'm sorry, no Spanish. When students were told this, they felt they were singled out, and it affected their performance a great deal. All of that is to say it looks bleak, but the great news is we have a solution. And to present that solution, I'm going to present, I'll let you present yourself. And you present yourself, and they will be handing out our program, what they will be presenting.
Good evening. Chairwoman Page, Vice Chair Delaware, Superintendent Cameras, school board members, thank you for this opportunity. The Volante Tech Center aims to create a safe environment as a resource where students across a broad age range and their parents can confidently gain technology skills in collaboration with the Richmond Public Schools Welcome Center, the Mayor's Youth Academy, and the Richmond City Parks and Recreation. The environment is designed to encourage an interactive, safe learning space for Latino students, which includes exposing Latino students to high-quality, engaging digital tools, engaging their parents in every stage of the learning process, and to develop parents' familiarity with technology. The Learning Lab is open during office hours, and an instructional time in specific academic disciplines or more intensive academic assistance on course-related work. The goal is to tutor these students to keep their pace with their peers and persistent difficulties, including reading and writing comprehension, as well as math, SO practice, and others. During this research, we found something called Éxito Escolar. It is an exciting multimedia college, access curriculum focused around a series of 4 bilingual films. And during my research on this, I did not know, this focuses on post-secondary education. And beforehand, I did not know what a technical training or a trade school was. I'm part of the IB program at TJ, and I was unaware of this until I did my research on Éxito Escolar. It opened my eyes to different opportunities that I have other than just college. And so with that, I intend to get certified in computer science now. We also want to introduce beginning English conversation and beginning Spanish conversation so that the people will know how to start a conversation or to keep up so they can be able to speak up for themselves.
30 seconds.
I just want to end it off with, I hope your eyes are open now. No, we're not invisible. We've been invisible for a long time, and it's finally time for change to happen. And so I thank you all for this opportunity, and thank you.
Ma'am, we have one more speaker who didn't sign up in advance. Is Cassie Fowler present? Oh, did he?
Hello.
I'm happy to step aside to the board.
And what was the name of the absent young man who did speak? I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Eddie Munoz.
Thank you.
And also members in the audience, please be reminded, if you want to show a sign of support, show by hands, waving your hands, but there is no clapping in the boardroom. But you show sign of support. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairwoman Page, Superintendent Cameron, and members of the board. My name is Cassie Powell, and I am providing public comment on behalf of the Legal Aid Justice Center. I thank you for the opportunity to provide you this feedback. As some of you may know, this month, VCU's Metropolitan Educational Research Consortium, or MERC, published a report titled Understanding Racial Inequity in School Discipline Across the Richmond Region. Although this report looks at racial disparities in school discipline across the Richmond metropolitan area, we believe the recommendations of the report are especially valuable to Richmond's public schools. I encourage the members of the board to review this report in full and would like to share some of its findings and recommendations with you. As the report notes, racial disparities in school discipline exist across all Richmond area schools. The authors note that for all divisions, Black students were consistently suspended out of school at 3 to 4 times the rate of white students, and account for 75% of suspensions for subjective infractions such as disruption, defiance, and disorderly conduct. Additionally, according to the Virginia Department of Education and RPS in 2017 and 2018, Black students represented 69% of the student population, but over 92% of students suspended for both short and long-term suspensions. Black students in areas of concentrated poverty like Metro Richmond were more than twice as likely to receive suspensions for subjective infractions. Research reveals that Black children are viewed as more adult-like and more culpable than white children, and that bias plays a significant role in disparate treatment. Research has further consistently shown that Black children do not misbehave more than their white peers, but the Merck researchers noted that the misperception that Black children did misbehave more permeated the educational environments they studied in Richmond. The report further notes that while school divisions may have written policies or practices such as codes of conduct, teachers and administrators implement and understand these policies in different ways. Students report needing to alter their behavior from class to class, and teachers reported confusion on specific policies and principles, resulting in misunderstandings by students that further lead to increased school disciplinary actions. At the Legal Aid Justice Center, we see the real-life implications of this report and this data in our casework every day. Children of color in Richmond Public Schools, particularly Black children with disabilities, suffer significantly higher rates of discipline than their peers. This is why our office filed a civil rights complaint with the U.S. Department of Education against RPS in 2016, a complaint that remains pending. We appreciate and agree with this administration's rhetoric of equity and restorative justice, but our clients have not yet seen real improvement in school climate or reduced exclusionary discipline. RPS issued nearly 8,000 short-term suspensions and over 500 long-term suspensions during the 2017-2018 school year. RPS needs a significant culture shift in the way its administrators and teachers perceive discipline and school climate, and must move away from exclusionary discipline as its primary response to certain student behaviors. Even one day of missed school through a short-term suspension can have negative consequences on a child's education. Our children deserve better, and school board members can and should take an active role in enacting policies and programs to reduce these disparities. We urge the board to take the following 7 specific steps. 1. Continue revising the RPS Code of Conduct to eliminate or define subjective and vague offenses. 2. Improve communication between central office administrators, school administrators, and teachers about discipline policies and outcomes. 3. Provide consistent, ongoing and supported trainings to teachers and administrators on cultural competency, implicit bias, and racial disparities. 4, involve students and families in revising those school policies. 5, revise the memorandum of understanding with the Richmond Police Department to ensure that school resource officers are not involved in routine school discipline matters. 6, specifically make racial disparities a focus in RPS's efforts to reduce school suspensions. And 7, encourage consistent practices of mutual respect, relationship building, and high expectations of teachers and administrators.
30 seconds.
As we begin this new school year, we urge the administration and the board to implement these recommendations in order to ensure that all children in RPS have an opportunity to truly thrive. Thank you for your time and consideration of this comment, and I thank you all for your work on behalf of Richmond's children.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairwoman Page, Vice Chair Dorr, board members, and Superintendent Cameras. I have 3 items that I will discuss in my time this evening. 1, I will be dispelling a myth. 2,
Ma'am, please state your name.
my name is Melandra Coleman,
Thank
and I am speaking on behalf of the Richmond Education Association. My apologies. 2, giving thanks, and 3, public information and some exciting updates as far as the REA is concerned. First, dispelling a myth. I know that when I first came into education, I thought that the Education Association was just for teachers. So I wanted to share publicly that the Education Association, REA and education associations all over the country, transportation, food services, security, custodians, administrative assistants, instructional aides, counselors, teachers, principals, librarians, athletic directors, occupational therapists, and anyone who is employed by RPS is eligible to be a member of the Richmond Education Association. Second, I would like to give thanks for the 2 following items. First, I would like to thank all of you who are able to attend our August the 6th luncheon that the REA hosted. And the second item for which I would like to give thanks is I would like to publicly thank the superintendent for our monthly meetings with the Richmond Education Association. And finally, some items about which we are excited at the REA. First, we were excited today to have a presence at the New Teacher Institute. There were 100 new educators that we had the opportunity to meet. Second, for the first time in REA's history, we have an online membership form. BEA.link/REA membership is where that is located. Second, we would publicly like to thank the Virginia Education Association for the donation of many books for our staff members. And if staff members are interested in picking up some of those books, we are located at 3615 Saunders Avenue, 23227, and our number is 648-3100. Also, I'd like to share that the first meeting of the Richmond Education Association is Monday, September the 9th at Fulton Elementary School. And finally, I would like to say welcome back to all of my fellow educators, all the 12-month, 11-month, and soon to be 9.5-month educator will be back in the buildings on Wednesday, the 21st. Thank you so much for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
My name is Bob Argybright, and good evening, Chairman Page, Superintendent Cameron, members of the school board. I'm here with Daniel Molina. Daniel is going into the 10th grade at Georgia High School. He's the product of our Saturday Academy. He came in October of last year. Daniel's making tremendous progress, but we'll still be coming back to the Saturday. This is Margaret, what's up from Honduras, related. Marjorie came after the first of the year. She sat in the corner of the classroom from the time that she got here until the time that I understood that this child can't see anything. No wonder they're not responding to it. So I took her out to the junior high, only to find out that in 2 years of age, she was bitten by a spider. She had a lot of chemo drugs go through her, treated like scar tissue. So then she was diagnosed, got a prescription, to go out to Walmart and get the glasses. If you could have seen the look on her face the first time she saw the features on the face, you can't imagine the thrill that would be all about. I would never point the finger at RPS for not discovering that because there's too many Marjories in the system. But Marjorie still does not know any English at all. So she is destined to go into the 6th grade at Big Shaw. And what I'm here to ask you is I want to keep her with me at Oak Road for the next year. Let me work with her. Let us get the foundation she needs from the English standpoint. What purpose does it serve to put her into the 6th grade when she's going to be probably one of those, could be one of those that just dropping out? So what have you got to lose? I know you can't back the whole system, but I'm just asking you, please listen to what I'm saying. I'm only asking you to give me and her family another opportunity here to get her ready for middle school. And if you can't do that, I just need for somebody to tell me, look at me, sit down with me and say, well, we heard you, but we can't possibly do that. We have better resources for her, and you're overly concerned. So I only ask for 2 things: permission to keep her back, or assurance
30 seconds.
that there are resources that I don't know about. So I thank you for your time. And just remember, there's a lot of materials that we have about 60 kids every Saturday, we're going to start October 6th. But we're making tremendous progress, but if you don't continue to work with her, I just have a real fear of what happens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Especially event we're having Friday at Thomas Jefferson, 3rd annual city summit. All about young men athletes from football, track, basketball, all the way around public high schools. Lieutenant already did it once. I hope you come again, but it's a great opportunity to share and speak to some of these young men. Some people ask, they were, what is this about? It's not about sport. It's about what happens. I coached a myriad. I had 40, 60 young men sitting in front of me in the city school, and 5 of them get full scholarship. That's so you did a great job. But what about the rest? What do they do? Most of them go home that first year. So I'm gonna take the year off, those. That's not an option. That's not an option. And there's so many different variables that you use. I heard young men technical things. Most of these young men don't even understand that after you graduate, you still can go to Texas. As a contractor, I have need for many different components of electricians to bricklayers as well that these young men can step into. Not just those in services is a great option too for some of these young men that they never get that and they'll be told about. So that's what we want to do. We're going to have a great panel of former RPS, some former RPS students that's own their own businesses, and we have some people running for city council that will be speaking that will pour into them, or each young man will receive gifts and lunch. And it's a great opportunity. We always talk about these young men, and I said it's a great opportunity to talk with them instead of about and just treat them better. Lastly, I'd like to thank President John Page for reaching out to us. And any of you have schools in your district that need something that contractors can do, painting to repairing to please let us know. We will reach out to those principals and get out there as soon as possible to take care of these schools. Because yes, we will focus on our high school, but we focus on all elementary schools and middle schools. So they will be coming. We want them to come to our high school. If you have any questions or you need anything, please reach out to the job foundation. Definitely still take care of it. That was that.
Mr. Jones, what's the date and time of the event again for Friday?
It's Friday at Thomas Jefferson High School, from 3 to 5, 23rd. Friday, 23rd. Everyone's invited. I reached out to the men. I called up to the men. I was like, please, baby, everyone's invited in the city. So, like I said, it's a great opportunity to inform people. First and foremost, good evening, everyone.
Based on Thomas Jefferson High School, teacher in the front line. As a teacher, I'm also a professor and lecturer in economics and leadership. Retired former investment banker, and I found my calling in education, in the business I was life. So $150,000 paycheck, I'm the happiest man in the world, and it's my first time in school, so I just want to meet you guys first and foremost. But the reason I'm in front of you today is I remember when I was 13 years old, I built my first computer.
Sir,
I apologize.
this one, you have a presentation and no public information. We don't, provide presentations.
Okay.
I'm sure we can set up another time.
Correct.
I mean, you can make comments.
No, I can do that, and then I can just recall the presentation altogether. Great, so let me do that, if that's okay.
And state your name.
Sure. First name is Bismarck, last name is Gamble. I'm a Jefferson High School teacher of business. As I alluded to in my brief introduction, I am a teacher in the front line. When I was 13 years old, my parents actually thought I could never make money being a computer programmer, so they actually persuaded me to go into economics 101, so now they regret it. Got my first computer when I was 13 years old, so I've been an active technologist since I can remember. Make a long story short, since I've been in the front line, I truly believe that every child is a scholar, period. If we give them the right tools, they can do some amazing things. And that tool is something we call plug-in. When I'm in the front line, I can literally have a hard time telling my students, you can have a conversation around classroom management or engagement, but I believe the cell phone is the greatest tool we ever have in this modern day. I always start my class with a quote. Mark Twain said it very well. He said, don't ever let education get in your way of learning. So I always start my conversation, what can I teach you that you can't find on your own? Once they can Google www.google, the rest of the world is accessible to them, aka university or YouTube. So we built a software called Plugin that can allow me to be able to engage my students in the moment while I'm teaching. If I have a PowerPoint slide, I'll hijack their phone for the moment. They're gonna go on Instagram and we have a joke in the class we call it Boo Love It. I said, no, actually engaging in the classroom. When I move my slide, it moves on their phone. After class, one of my hardest challenges every Monday, it's the first day of school for me because what I taught Monday through Friday has been forgotten. But through Plugin, I can actually engage them and say, what are we learning 20 minutes at a time? I just want RPS to explore this. I'm actually using this on the university level, getting some positive feedback, and that's something that I'm doing with the school board. Let's consider infusing technology into our everyday learning with the device that they have in their hand already. Many of our students have better phones than all of us combined in this room right now, so let's use that to our advantage. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.
As the rest of the reflections enjoy having this time speak.
And also that the record reflect that Dr. Zucchini sent in notification that he will not be in attendance this evening.
My name is Kevin Keeman. I'm currently a junior at Georgia High School. I'm currently in Nevada. One of my initial requests to take advanced basic courses on virtual regime months ago was not able to be fulfilled since there was no 12-month counselor or any counselor at Georgia High School for the month of July. The deadline of August 1st has passed and gone, so registration for AP courses on virtual regime is no longer an option. I had emailed the new principal multiple times in July and August about taking 4 advanced placement courses on engineering, but have not gotten any response from him. I have emailed another individual and was directed to the new school counselor. I gave my phone number, but I have not received any response from the Georgia counselor since Wednesday, August 14th. It is important for me to take these AP courses because they are not offered at Georgia High School. If the risk of overloading is an issue, I wouldn't mind taking the Ingenuity AP courses 2 at a time. But I would like to be given the same opportunity as other students from neighboring school districts that have a wider selection of AP courses. From this, I do want to say that I'm very appreciative of what RPS has done so far to help further my education. I also do not want the transition of staffing of my high school to negatively affect the education opportunities of Georgia students like me or others of the matter. Principal Reba Green and school counselors were very supportive of students challenging themselves and were very supportive of enhancing the educational opportunities and rigor for all students. Both of them, in fact, discussed with me about the possibilities of extending of not only AP courses, but the college level courses to be taught at Georgia High School campus, as well as as well before their departure. I want the staff of George West High School to be just as supportive of education, not just for me, but for all students at George West High School, for this school year as well. I'd like to thank you all, the school board and the superintendent, for listening to my request. I want to build as strong of an educational foundation for myself so that I can be well equipped to be a big positive impact in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. So I'm speaking as Donna Seymour, and I wanted to wrap up because we've lost the time. For the Palante Technical Center, we have a couple of asks. One is that we have access to the programs that the students have. For example, Imagine Learning, particularly for reading comprehension for elementary school, the Edgeability, the whatever program there is, because this is for, we are servicing only RPS students. Secondly, I wanted to say the rest of the story, Marjorie's story. While it's compelling, she's not unusual. I want you to know that this is a crisis in RPS. And the rest of her story is that when she came here from Honduras, she had no education. She hadn't gone to school. So we placed her in a class that's age appropriate, then we expect her to move on. She is one of many. And I am asking you, I'm not speaking this to like, if I were, I'd be saying we're demanding that this is a crisis and it needs to be addressed. And my last ask is, I noticed last year, and this year we're really keeping a sharp eye on it. It seems that it's become the norm when you say people of color or the brown kids, black kids, however it's posed, it always ends up being the African American kids. You all say one, everybody moves forward together, but if you look at the statistics of the ELs and the Hispanic kids, they have been dropping consistently for the last 3 years. So along with that, my ask is, and to kind of add on to the gentleman who just spoke, I would ask that if we're talking about being inclusive, that we quit using the Southside Community Services, the Southside Plaza, as the community meeting place for Latinos. They don't go to school there. I would strongly recommend that we begin using George Wythe or Bouchard. They have the most critical issues, and we need to do it together, inclusively, so all parents come. And if it's good enough for the students at George Wythe, it's got to be good enough for the community and anybody else. And the same with Bouchard. Bouchard is now 51% Latino. And we've got to do better this year. We really have to do better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Superintendent, our board members, I'm glad to hear the last speaker come up and talk so diligently about what our ESL students need. I once served as Richmond Public Schools chair of the Multicultural Task Force. And although a lot of those things that we talked about with other families were a vision of what you're seeing today, we knew it was coming. We knew that Southside was going to be one of those areas where there was a large growth of Hispanic families that were coming to the community. And I would encourage those that, in the sound of my voice, to please reach out to me. I'm president of the Jeff Davis Neighborhood Civic Association, where a lot of those Hispanics live. And we are open. There's things that are going on. I don't want to put it out there and open right now, but there are a lot of things that are going on, that resources that would help you, and we can do it better together. I want you to know that. So I'll say that much. The other piece of what I want to say is that never stood before this board and talked about how jealous I've been of the superintendent. I would like to believe, with the support of our chair, Don Page, my board representative, and Felicia Cosby and others, that I'd like to brag about the fact that we have one of the largest and well-attended national night out. And one of the prizes of National Night Out is to be able to provide book bags with school supplies in them. And I found out today through a news report that Superintendent Cameron, that you have about 14,000 book bags. Or either there's an organization that came forward to Richmond Public Schools to provide book bags, let me put it that way. So I'm a little jealous about that because I thought that I was really doing something, providing 1,000 book bags over in the South Side. But I say that in humorous, but I say that as a mindful moment that there are other community advocates, there are other businesses out here, there are other entities out here that are willing to step up. And I'm glad to know that someone else stepped up and is doing their part. So with that being said, again, thank you so much for those that attended, those that could attend, those that were there with us in heart, those that supported in any kind of way you could. The other last piece I want to say on behalf of United Communities Against Crime, where I serve as Executive Director, that it's no secret that the Richmond branch of the NAACP was attacked verbally and left with threatening messages. And that came after a press conference of the president going forward and saying that he supported Richmond Public Schools in its effort of the vandalism that was taking place. And United Communities Against Crime, what you don't know, to know this board, that we stand behind the NAACP as a separate organization to support any efforts of making sure that our buildings in Richmond Public Schools for our students, and that everybody's treated fairly, and that we not take it lightly. And I've been directly in contact with the police chief, just left him a little bit earlier today, and he has assured that he's going to make sure that his department, as well as the FBI, is now investigating this matter to make sure that our folks are safe, not only our children, but our staff, and you all as well. So I do want to bring that report back to you. God bless you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Good evening, School Board. Thank you guys for having me. My name is Justice Peebles. I am 21 years old, and today I'm going to speak a little bit about my organization I started this year for young adults. My organization is called The Better Me, and they're passing around some stuff so you guys can look at it. And it's for young adults from 16 to 28 to provide another outlet for young people to go and grow and continue to develop and discover themselves outside of school, because there is a world outside of school as well, and that we all live in. And my generation is struggling. My generation is lost. A little bit of facts behind that. 7,000 students drop out of high school each year. 56% of college students aren't finished in 6 years, and most end up dropping out. That's over half. The third leading cause of death is teen suicide, and young people aren't succeeding like you guys are. Young people are struggling, and young people are lost. And I wanted to do something about it myself, because I've seen it in family, I've seen it in friends, and with this organization that I started, I wanted to give young people inspiration, purpose, and direction. It's something that young people are lacking, and not enough organizations support young people, not enough organizations out there for young people over the age of 18. And I just wanted to give a few words of wisdom that an old man once told me. He told me that it takes a village to raise a child. There's a lot of lost children out there. And I wanted to ask for you guys' support and help and assistance from the RPS, just to support other programs out there. I know you guys can't slay the dragon by yourselves. You guys need assistance, and as do we. And I can't do it by myself. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. If there are no others in the audience to speak at this time, this will conclude our public information period.
The next item is item 3, board actions, receive for action, program of studies.
Good evening. Good evening, Chairwoman Page, Vice Chair Dorr, school board members, Superintendent Cameras. As I presented back in June, the program of studies is presented to you tonight for approval. It was presented in the early part of the summer for review and feedback. The program of studies we present to you tonight for final approval has been reviewed deeply by the Virginia Department of Education, and we feel confident in the validity and accuracy of the courses therein. In order to offer the courses we have, as well as our local courses to ensure students receive credit for those local courses, we must obtain school board approval for the program of studies, as well as the local courses therein for board adoption. The local courses presented, they are here, in order to obtain VDOE approval and sign off, those courses had to have curriculum developed. We also developed curricula for all of our honors courses, which has not been done in the past. So the local courses presented to you also have curricula behind them, so we can share any of those details as requested. And the specific local courses requiring board adoption are listed here. Again, we're asking tonight for approval of the program of studies, including approval of the local courses therein. Take any questions you have.
Ms. Owen,
I move that we approve the program as presented.
need a second?
I think we need the motion to specifically.
Approve the program of studies for 1920, including the approval of local courses contained therein. 2019, 2020.
It's been moved by Ms. Owen and seconded by Ms. Burke to approve the program of studies for 2019-2020, including the approval of the local courses contained therein. Any discussion? Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just real briefly, I understand obviously that for 1920 we had a lot of work to do in cleaning past mistakes up, and would have been naive to think that we could offer as robust curriculum as we would prefer. But do we anticipate going forward, if we have an instructor in a particular school that is interested in providing a particular course and soliciting approval, what does that process look like? They presumably go to the department chair and or their principal. Can you just speak to that?
Yes, so the process is, and we did follow this process in the early spring. We went through, the department chairs comprise our committee as required by board policy. And then this committee is run by our Department of Curriculum and Instruction. So both our department chairs, principals, and instructional specialists have the opportunity to request or propose new courses. Those can be either state-approved courses that are currently not offered or locally developed courses. In order for locally developed courses to be considered, a full course description alongside as well as we first say go or no go. So when we look at it, we might say, you know what, there's a state course that's exactly like what you proposed locally. We recommend this so that you don't have to develop a whole curriculum yourself. we give a go, no-go, an initial, and then we say there's a deadline by which curricula needs to be submitted. If that deadline is met and we agree with that curricula, we can then add it to the list for local approval. This year, you'll see that the directive was to, given all the work we had to do, including the development of curricula for honors classes, we advised schools to not seek a huge array of local courses. Also, we have a lot of work to do on our core curricula, as we will talk about later with our achievement results. But that's the general process. And next, for the 2021 school year, we will kick that process off in early December. So for teachers who are interested in that, I would encourage talking to their principal and their department chair, and they can guide them when we issue the survey through the department chairs in the early winter.
Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. One question that I have is when I was going through the program studies guide and comparing it to past versions, it didn't seem like there's much information about middle school, in particular middle school courses in the document. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, this is specifically a high school program of studies. We do not feel that combining those two things, one makes the document very unwieldy, but also is confusing. And so we do hope in the future to produce a separate middle school course offering guide. We did produce a list of middle school courses to middle schools this year, but in the future we hope to do a guide for both middle school and high school. But given the work we had to do with high school and the significant overhaul that had to be done, we chose to focus on high school only. I do believe we noted middle school courses that were eligible. We noted if the course was eligible for middle school credit. Sorry, if it was eligible to be taken in the middle school.
Ms. Gibson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so then can you talk a little bit more about just the timing once again? So for next year, because I do have unease that folks and students have signed up for courses that we haven't yet approved by adopting the program of studies guide. So what would be the timeline next year in terms of both scheduling and then the adoption of the revised document?
So I think the ideal adoption timeframe is February, so we would back map from that. I will say that the timeline and process in some ways can be impacted by the MOU and in terms of any pre-approval guidelines that the DOE outlines for approval for next year. We hope that given the extensive review that was done this year, that will be minimal, but I can't speak to that until this comes up in December.
Ms. Dorr?
Thank you. Could you also give a timeline on I noticed the transcript, mid-year transfer of grades and the out-of-district transfer of grades. This is an issue that has come up for me specifically a lot, and it's just very hard for families to translate their GPAs from one school to the other. So question one is, what's the timeline on that? And then question two is, can we also get that somewhere publicly that's not just in the program of studies guide, but somewhere that's easy for people to find?
Are you speaking to the addenda in terms of the policies and practices? So we would like to have a full draft of that ready to go by the end of first semester. And the reason we need time to really flesh that out. So the idea will be by the end of first semester we would have that. Currently that work is done, but it's not codified or consistent. So we have it in there as a placeholder to make it really clear. And then in terms of your second question, a place where that can be easily accessible, I think it's my understanding that all of that information we want easily accessible, so I would take recommendations on the best places to make that available. I'm not sure, this will be on the website of course, but I would love suggestions on how else to make all of that information accessible.
Okay. Call the question. You're voting on the motion made by Ms. Owen to approve the program of studies
for 2019-2020, including the approval of the local courses contained therein. The second was given by Ms. Burke. Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
No, and I would like the record to state that I'm voting no because the middle school courses are not included in the document.
Mr. Young? Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Yes.
Thank you.
Your motion passes 7-1.
Next item.
Your next item is item 3.02, receive for action a resolution regarding the demolition of the existing George Mason Elementary School and an update from the joint construction team.
Good evening, Chairman Page, Vice Chair Dorr, Superintendent Cameras, and RPS School Board. I'd like to bring forth a proposal for what to do with the existing George Mason Elementary School building. So just to provide some background, because George Mason sits in what's known as an old historic area of Richmond, all changes to the building need to go to the Committee for Architectural Review or CAR. The initial CAR submission for the new building went to CAR back in late fall last year. It was approved with minor modifications to make sure that the building kept up with the general look and feel of the neighborhood. But we're now at the point where we need to formally present a plan for how to demolish what to do with the current building. And our plan is to strongly recommend that we demolish the building to allow for more green space for the kids and for the community. So one of the challenges with the current George Mason building, our site in general, is that it's very compact. At just under 8 acres, we're trying to put a lot in there for 750 student school. So if you look to the left, you can see an overlay of the new George Mason building. And if you look to the right, underneath the dark green shading where the athletic field is, you can make out the current George Mason building. All this to say that the current building does not go away, it's not demolished. We're not going to have enough space for the athletic fields, for the tennis courts, for the basketball courts, some of the play areas that we have planned. So we really need to demolish the building for the sake of the community and for the kids there.
Ms. Burke.
George Mason to be renamed. I move, Madam Chair, that we accept the report as given and that we do move forward on the demolition of the old George Mason Elementary School.
Second. It's been moved by Ms. Burke and seconded by Ms. Owen to approve the action to resolve the demolition of the existing George Mason Elementary School. Any discussion? Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of course, I support demolition to accommodate the green space and facilities, but I do have a question relevant to the cost specifically. I don't think, or correct me if I'm wrong, but the numbers that have grown to about 150 have not included demolition costs. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. I won't be voting in support of the proposal. I think when I studied architecture, I have a master's degree in architecture, and I think that my professor Dior would have significant adjective because we didn't do the work to explore whether this building could have been incorporated into the design somehow. And so because I had I didn't support the process that we took to begin with, which was to really skip this planning process, which includes looking at the site and the existing buildings and having a clear understanding in terms of the requirements that an urban design committee and such would have in the city. And this is a city that's all about its history. And so I think that it's really a shame that we didn't explore whether or not it could be implemented. And it's possible that we could have gone through the process and we would But I think that exploration is important to do, and for that reason, unfortunately, I won't be voting in support. I do ask though, it makes me uneasy that we are also approving this without having the demolition numbers to identify when that will be confirmed.
I think that those requests are out now. I'm not trying to time when we have a final number.
Mr. Simmons, though, the demolition is part of the overall contract for Georgia Mason.
That's correct.
This is contained within the overall numbers that were presented at the Education Compact. This is not adding anything new to the contract. It's just a piece that hasn't gone out to bid yet because it's still pending before CARB. Having the board's support for this action, though, will be helpful with our case in front of CARB. I just want to add on behalf of the administration, while I certainly respect the historical significance of certain buildings and certain neighborhoods, I think we can all agree that the children of Georgia Mason deserve to have a beautiful athletic field, tennis courts, basketball court, playground spaces that are the equal of any other school in the city. And so, as Mr. Simmons said, it is strongly the recommendation of the administration to approve this recommendation. Thank you.
Call the question.
The motion was made by Mrs. Burke, seconded by Ms. Owen, to approve the action to resolve the demolition of the existing George Wood Elementary School. Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
I'm sorry, George Mason Elementary School. I did. Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
No.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-1. The next item is to review and receive for action the job description and pay grade of the senior auditor position.
So board members, finance committee met before the board meeting this evening to address the resumes that have been submitted for the senior auditor position. And Ms. Dorr, the finance chair, can speak more in detail.
Good evening, board members. We are going to be reaching out to 8 auditor candidates who we reviewed resumes, and we're excited about the slate of candidates. Because we're going to be interviewing so many, our first interview date was August 5th, September 5th, at 4 p.m., but we're going to add a second date, which is September 4th at 4 p.m. So please mark your calendars, September 4th and September 5th at 4 p.m. The only final thing remaining item is just to approve the pay grade of the senior auditor position. So I move that we approve the pay grade of the auditor position as presented by Ms. Bramble.
Need a second? Second. It's been moved by Ms. Dorr and seconded by Ms. Burke to approve the pay grade of the senior auditor position. Any discussion? Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. So I pushed to have a discussion about the pay grade. My concern with the pay grade as it's stated now is when we approved this position, we also approved our lobbyist position, and it's unclear to me that these two positions, which were approved for the same salary, are such different pay grades. And so, so I'm unclear as to that. At this point, I mean, as we've stated, we've already reviewed resumes, and so I should hope the next time that we are looking to bring on a hire, that the adopting the pay grade would be done prior to, and promoting the position would be done prior to accepting resumes. But yeah, I think that it's unclear to me why the rate is so different. one question I have in terms of the position itself is our existing auditor reporting to the senior auditor?
Yes. And Ms. Bramble, she can speak to the pay grade if anyone has any questions regarding the pay grade. She maybe can answer some of Ms. Gibson's questions.
This position was originally entitled School Board Auditor, and it was at pay grade 123. When it was elevated to Senior School Board Auditor, it was then moved to 125.
So their current auditor is at pay grade 123.
That's correct.
And so I'm wondering, is that typical then that the direct report would be 2 pay grades behind, or what, I'm wondering what the typical difference from a pay grade standpoint is?
Well, given that a pay grade spans a salary band, so there can be a huge variance within a pay grade of several $1,000s. So a pay grade can start at 110, for example, and go all the way to 145 within that same salary band. So it is conceivable that a supervisor can be 2 pay grades above a subordinate, but be at a different point on that salary band, if that makes sense.
Ms. Cosby?
I was just waiting, I wanted to hear from.
Okay. Ms. Gibson?
So in terms of the lobbyist position in that pay grade, can you speak a little bit about the distinction with the 133 pay grade for the lobbyist versus this position?
Well, not having been here when that decision was made, I'm not quite sure what the logic was behind that particular job listing. I'm not sure why it's
So Ms. Bramble, I guess just to, for clarity, so you say it's a range.
within each salary band, there's a
Right,
range.
so talking about the senior auditor, so the range is from 123 to,
Well, the 123 salary band, I don't have it in front of me, but it has, there was a range within every salary band.
I'm getting it. But there's a range.
Yeah, each pay grade has a range.
So the band is 20,
But this one, 125.
But the range goes up to 110. That's right.
all right. Call the question?
The motion is made by Ms. Ford, seconded by Mrs. March, to approve the pay grade of the senior auditor position as presented. Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson? No. Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Ms. Dole?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-1.
So board members, please be reminded that interviews for the senior auditor position will take place on September 4th and the 5th, starting at 4. So please add it to your calendar. Thank you, Ms. Bramble.
The next item is 04, receive for action personnel actions.
Good evening again, Madam Chair, Madam Vice Chair, school board members. The recommended town office actions for the school board meeting scheduled for Monday, August 19, 2019 include the nomination of 86 employees, the change of contract of 25 employees,
the resignation of 15 employees, the furlough of 6 employees, the returning from leave of 1 employee, the reappointment of 5 employees, the rescission of employment of 1 employee, and the termination of 1 employee.
I move that we approve the presentation from coming the actions of the talent office presented at this meeting.
It's been moved by Ms. Owen and seconded by Ms. Burke to approve the recommendations from the talent office. Any discussion? Call the question? Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Young? Ms. Hasley? Yes. Ms. Burke? Yes. Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Ms. Wood? Yes. Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 8-0. The next item is school board business, item 4.01, is to receive reports from board members on committees. The board facts this evening was posted the report of the finance committee from its July meeting. That's the only report I have.
Ms. Dorr, would you like to add anything?
I called this, meeting last week, so I need to change some of our last school board meetings, I need to change some of the dates, but, as part of the finance committee, Mr. Barlow and his page conducted a research review of budget calendar best practices from, our peer cities across the state, as well as our regional cities, and also, some cities with similar demographics to Richmond across the country. And, essentially, when we looked at the review and compared it to our calendar, we came to the conclusion that we have a pretty good budget calendar, but an area of opportunity for us as a board is to make sure that we're actually adhering to that calendar. So we decided as a board, or as a committee, that we would, as part of the finance committee, make sure that we check in on making sure that we have the requisite community meetings scheduled, et cetera, as it relates to the budget for next year. As part of the only best practice that we thought was something that we'd like for the board to consider is a budget direction document. So you'll see in the attachments, Arlington County School Board puts together a budget direction document that is general guidance for the administration on what they'd like to see in the upcoming year's budget. So we thought that would be a nice addition to this year's process and something that we could work on together at our next school board retreat. So we would ask that school board members take a minute to review the budget direction document from Arlington and send Mrs. Wilson any ideas, or you can send it to me, any ideas for things that you want us to consider as it relates to the budget direction document. We'll be compiling that at our finance committee meeting on the 27th, and then we can review together at our school board retreat in September.
Ms. Owen and Ms. Thompson.
So the report you're talking about from Arlington, that the other one is the best practices in school budgeting.
There, I'm now looking at board docs, and I believe it has not been posted. I'll make sure that you all have the Arlington one just as a separate attachment, and we can make sure that also uploaded to board docs. It's not a very lengthy document, it's 2 pages or so, but it just provides some budgeting priorities, which we thought might be a nice add.
Ms. Cosby. Thank you. Thanks to the finance committee.
Thank you to Ms. Page and Mr. Barlow for putting together the research.
Next item. The next item is 4.02, discuss actions for the structure of legal services. So board members
this item is on the agenda under the directive from the board to either one, create an ad hoc committee, or just provide the research and present that information to the administration to provide a recommendation for the board in December 2019. Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I've been fond of the ad hoc committees in the past. I think they've done really good work. One of which I've got the privilege of serving with you on, Madam Chair. That would be my recommendation for going forward.
So we can define the scope of so first, is there a consensus for the ad hoc committee? To create an ad hoc committee. To research legal services. So there appears to be no support to create an ad hoc committee. One would be task the administration to provide submit a recommendation to the board in December of 2019.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm certainly open to discussing how legal services are delivered, and would be happy to serve on an ad hoc committee in order to do so. I do think this is something that we should talk about delicately, of course, but I'm happy to be a part of such a committee.
Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. So if I recall, the discussion during our board deliberation was potentially outsourcing our legal services. And so if we were to do that, we would need to have like an RFP that would be, so we'd be able to get various options, or what would be the process if we decided to outsource legal services?
I think the board, we need to do research before we make a definitive decision. Based on the discussion in the beginning, there was no consensus around creating an ad hoc committee to provide the research, but based on best practices regarding legal services. So what is the pleasure of the board? Ms. Dorr?
To the extent I don't have a lot of legal expertise to offer, but certainly would support some of the attorney on our board in helping us think this through. And I'm fine with setting up an ad hoc committee if others are.
Ms. Gibson?
And this doesn't seem like a legal decision, it seems like a procurement process. And so, so I think the question is, how can we determine what the cost would be to outsource, and then make a decision if we think that the savings is worthwhile?
So Ms. Gibson, I'm giving you a historical perspective. We have, this exercise was done in the past, and we researched the cost analysis based on best practices for other school localities. And what, at that time, we found that based on the services provided, we were not able to support the financial piece of it. So if we want to create an ad hoc committee, we need to define the scope of services, the scope of work, to research to do a cost analysis based on surrounding localities. Because again, Ms. Lily can speak to the services, and superintendent can speak to the level of services that we are receiving from our legal.
I would just add, I actually think this is more than just a cost analysis. I think it's a question of what are the types of legal services that the school board and administration need, what of that is currently being provided, and the cost of that, as well as are there other structures or other ways to provide that, and what would it cost to do that. And so I think it's a little bit broader than just a quick financial analysis. I think it's also stepping back and saying, what are the kinds of legal services that we might want more of, and what would that look like, and is that, how would it work with a firm, and how would it work with a couple of staff on site? And even, a couple of staff on site might be less than the retainer that we pay currently, but we might not get the breadth of resources we get with the current retainer with the whole firm. So I think there's a lot of different moving pieces that really need to be sussed out. I'm glad to have the administration take the lead on this and bring a proposal to the school board in December. I just don't want to have the auditor debacle again. I just want to know who's doing what. So if there's an ad hoc committee that is going to take the lead on this, that's totally fine, and we can sit back and let the board go forward, or we can take the lead on it and bring something to the board in December to consider. I'm good either way. I just need clarity so I can manage to the outcome.
Ms. Cosby and Ms. Holmes.
Thank you. I am okay with an ad hoc committee, but I do want us to give some parameters and scope of work sooner rather than later. And I will just articulate I'm extremely concerned because we made a budget decision to save so much in terms of our funding, and that depends on timing too. And so now we're talking about possibly making a decision in December. And I also feel as if, and I hope that as we move forward, as we're talking about these budget calendars, and what our expectations are, that we do this work before making those types of budget decisions. Because it might end up that what we're getting right now, as the superintendent and Chairwoman Page have just stated, maybe what we're getting right now, we're getting more bang for our buck right now in terms of our services. So I just, this process is a bit frustrating and is a bit backwards. So let's be very mindful of that, because I almost feel like because we made these decisions based on, and I forget the word, it wasn't, savings or potential savings, that we explore these things and be very mindful and intentional beforehand.
Ms. Owen?
Well, it sounds to me like what we're really looking at is a two-part thing. Do we want to continue to outsource, because that's really what we're doing now, or do we want to bring it on board? And I really think that all these people on this board are really, really busy. And if this is something that, nevertheless, that has been brought to us as something that we want to do, then I'm fine with having the administration do it rather than trying to have an ad hoc committee do all the research if the administration is willing to do it, because believe it or not, that's not much time. An ad hoc committee trying to get people together for meetings, sometimes that can delay things unnecessarily.
Ms. Byrd? Madam Chair, help me to recall, how did we get to this point of discussion? What took place in regards to why this came up regarding should we having worked, Richmond Public Schools, as you well know, has had both. We've had a full-time attorney for years, and then we switched over as we have now. So if we're talking about having a committee or the administration, this will be done for 2021.
So my recollection was that during the FY20 budget discussion, this was raised, I think even enshrined in a motion, I can't quite recall, I think from Mr. Young, as a compromise resolution to move the budget process forward, stipulating that we would review the legal services to potentially identify savings going forward. In my mind, the goal would be to have something for the board, either from the administration or from an ad hoc committee, to consider in December, which would be towards the beginning of the heart of the budget season, such that the board would be able to make a decision in the FY21 budget that would then be effectuated come July 1. And so there would be some 4 to 6 months, depending upon when that decision was made, for the administration to then either maintain the current contract or to go in a different direction if that was the recommendation and adoption of the board.
So based on that, can we come to an agreement if we task the administration to bring back a recommendation? The board can provide parameters as far as, the board's desire. So that's something to think about. Ms. Cosmo and Ms. Burke.
And as we talk about the parameters and the scope of work, also we need to be looking at if we make a decision, because what Superintendent Cameron has just said, that would be in effect for the 2021 school year. We voted on something for the 1920, potential savings for the 1920. Now, I'm not saying to rush anything wrong, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that is what we voted on. And so therefore, if we decide to keep things as they are, we need to look at where the potential savings, and that amount, I can't remember it right now, will be coming from. Yes.
Ms. Burke and Ms. Dorr.
All right, but my concern is we have lots of work to be done. The board is this, I want to just state, do we really have time at this point to be able to do that in a constructive, effective manner? Number two, the administration, to be sincere, our number one goal should always be student achievement. Student achievement. So as we're putting forth that effort with another task at this time of the year to address, I'm thinking that's energy that could be used elsewhere, otherwise. So I'm not going to vote in favor of an ad hoc or administration at this time of the year. Being because of where we are, what our children, they need us. So while they're putting together data for that, we're not in the hole. Just go ahead and look at that for the next budget cycle. That's my suggestion. I'm not voting in favor of either. Thank you.
Ms. Dorr and Ms. Gibson. Ms. Gibson.
Thank you. So I found the document that has the revisions that Ms. Dorr proposed as far as our adopted budget. And it said the school board conduct a review of its contract for legal services. It will benchmark best practices with the counties and peer districts to determine whether to insource or outsource its legal administration. The school board will bring its research for discussion and action at the first meeting in December. Potential to save $130,000 annually. So that was already agreed upon by the body. So, I do think that's what we have to do. And certainly to Ms. Cosby's point, if that's not the plan any longer, then we need to figure out where we're going to get $130,000 from, because that's part of the adopted budget. So,
Ms. Dorr?
So, Mr. Cameron, could you clarify, my understanding was that the potential savings was just a talking point, it was not actually built in as a savings in the budget.
So my recollection of that, Mr. Simmons, if he could look at the numbers, but was yes, that was a effort for the future to have such a potential savings, but that we did not book a net negative $130,000 for FY20. Is that accurate, Mr. Simmons?
No, we actually did.
Well, there you go. All right, so then we would have to come up with that deficit. Okay.
Ms. Cosby?
And just to refresh your memories, now, the administration came up with a proposal. We came up with a counter proposal. So they did recommend some savings. So I'm just, if this is the direction that we don't want to go in just yet, I'm just saying we have to be conscious of that.
Yes.
Okay?
Ms. Gibson?
So, Ms. Dorr, when you developed this, I'm wondering, in order to save that $130,000, if we were to pull this internally, when would that new hire need to be in place by?
I think we need to set up an ad hoc committee, so I've proposed that we set up an ad hoc committee to review the insourcing or outsourcing of the services.
That was a motion, I would second it.
It's been moved by Ms. Dorr and seconded by Mr. Barlow, Mr. Young, to create an ad hoc committee, for legal services and discussion.
So just to clarify, the ad hoc committee, if approved, would take the lead on this work, and the administration will await further instruction based upon the work of the ad hoc committee. Is that accurate? Yes? Okay. Thank you.
A comment that Ms. Cosby made and Ms. Burke made. Is this something, because we cut legal services in our budget this budget cycle. Is that correct? I'm asking a question.
Again, based on what Mr. Simmons shared, it looks like we did have a reduction of $130,000 in that line item. We did pass a balanced budget though, so that wasn't accounted for somewhere. But we're not prepared this evening to speak to that. We certainly could do so. So just to finish that thought, if I may, Madam Chair. So our, I'll leave there.
So I guess my next question is, so we do not need to offset that line item. So then my next point is, our focus, we need to be on student achievement. And with everything that we have going on, I'm not in support of it right now. Because our focus, our children are dependent on us. And we need to be focusing on student achievement. Student achievement, student achievement, student achievement. Ms. Cosby.
Okay, understood. If we do not focus on this, if we don't focus on this potential savings of, what is it, $130,000, okay? According to Mr. Simmons, it's already been accounted for. It's already been deducted, right? So our next step will be to do what? If we're not gonna focus on taking it from legal, we're We don't wanna focus on that right now. Are we gonna ask to revisit what had been proposed by administration perhaps for that $132,000 savings?
Next budget cycle?
It's for this budget cycle. It's for this 1920.
Ms. Burke?
So we were $130,000, that's quite a lot of money. So what I'm thinking in terms of, we cut that back to cover something else.
Okay. Why don't we do this? I can discuss with Mr. Simmons and we can do a discussion presentation on those funds at a later date. We are obviously not prepared to have that discussion in detail tonight, and there's no sense in hypothesizing. I think, again, the core question, whether we have to come up with 130 or not, is does the board want to move forward per its motion, which passed as part of the budget process? I'm hearing yes to explore it, and I think there might be a motion on the table from this door to create the ad hoc committee.
So call the question.
The motion was made by Ms. Dorr, seconded by Mr. Young to create an ad hoc committee for legal services. Ms. Dorr?
Yes.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Aye.
Ms. Cosby?
No.
Ms. Burke?
No.
Ms. Owen? Ms. Payne?
No.
Motion passes 4-3.
So, the administration? I'm sorry. Yes. Right. So, right now, what is the scope of work for this ad hoc committee and timeline and at completion of its findings, recommendation to the administration, will conclude the ad hoc committee. So at this time, what are the parameters? Right, so first, who wants to be on the committee? Mr. Young? Mr. Barlow? Ms. Dorr? Mr. Young, you be the chair. Because I named you first. So the parameters. Parameters for this committee, Ms. Gibson?
I'd like to suggest that the very first deliverable that the ad hoc committee come back with is a time frame that we would need to have a new hire in place in order to achieve the savings that have been included in our adopted budget.
Another parameter, types, I'm sorry, Ms. Owen,
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
types of services.
I'm not sure that all of us are aware of all the services that are being provided by our legal team. So I think that we definitely need to ask them for a comprehensive list of the things that are provided.
So Ms. Lilly, you're able to provide a comprehensive list of all the services that you provide to the school district. Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Might I recommend that the committee propose at our next board meeting a timeline, set of deliverables, and issues that we'll be exploring so that we have an opportunity to discuss it a little bit more further and put together something that reflects a coherent approach.
Ms. Cosby?
Thank you, Ms. Farlow. I think for you all perhaps to come back with maybe some additional things, but I do think it's important. And I don't even know if this board can do it at this session, quite frankly. I mean, having an ad hoc committee is just something that's just decided. So perhaps if you gave us a timeline to share some ideas that I think it's worth the consideration of the entire, you all consider the entire board feedback in terms of your deliverables, in addition to what you all think.
So, board members, our next board meeting, September 3rd. If we can provide feedback to the clerk by close of business, August 30th. Is that enough time? No, 30th, next Friday. And it gives us some time to process this as well. So we agreement to provide feedback to the clerk by the 30th of August, close of business. Okay. So Madam Clerk, can you restate?
So the members of the ad hoc committee are Mr. Young, who is the chair, Mr. Marble, and Ms. Ford. And feedback is due to me by close of business on August 30th regarding timeline guidelines and parameters.
Next item.
The next item is item 5, administration business, receive an update on rezoning and facilities plan.
Good evening, everyone. Just a brief update this evening. We had a number of meetings last week with Mr. Cropper, who was available to answer questions about the latest round of proposals. And we have a series of meetings this week that I will be leading. Just to remind everybody, tomorrow, August 20th from 6 to 8 p.m. will be the rezoning advisory committee meeting focused on the north side. So all members of the committee are of course welcome, but the focus of that meeting is on the north side. That will be held at John Marshall High School. On August 21st from 6 to 8 p.m. again, the rezoning advisory committee will be meeting focused on the south side at the Southside Community Services Center. On August 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. we will be focused on the East End at Martin Luther King Jr. Middle School. And on the 23rd, again from 6 to 8 p.m. we'll be focused on the West End at John B. Carey Elementary School. At each of those meetings we will gather feedback around, as I said, the latest set of proposals which enshrine the work of the committee at our last whole group meeting. In addition, we will look at secondary schools, middle and high, which we did not focus on at the last whole meeting of the RAC. And then all of that work will inform the next draft for the whole committee to review at their next whole meeting in September.
Just as a point of information, I know we were all shocked and horrified and sad by the death of Mr. Eugene Mason. He was a 9th District representative to the Rezoning Advisory Committee, and I have
just make sure Dr. Harris has contact information so we can include her in all of this. Thank you. It may also be appropriate at the chair's discretion to have a moment of silence for Mr. Mason, a former school board member. Right? Thank you.
Sorry. Ms. Gibson?
I thank you for the details. I would like to get a little bit deeper in terms of the timeline, just to have a really clear picture in terms of what to expect. So if I'm understanding correctly, in August, we will be getting community feedback on the elementary school zones that are proposed. And then in September, there'll be, we'll receive the high school zones. And then what is the process from there look like? And I want to have I want to make sure there's clarity in terms of what the committee is tasked to deliver to the board. And there was an article that suggested that the committee might be making like a recommendation sound singular. And I want to make sure that there will be 3 to 5 options that come to the board as agreed upon. And so and the other piece I think I want to ensure that there's clarity on is the budget implications. So the other thing that the article highlighted was that that the committee hasn't been given cost information, and yet we need to know what these numbers are prior to adopting something. So I just want to make sure that we have all of this, it's seemingly minutia, very clear before, so that the community knows what to expect as we roll out this significant process.
Thank you for the question. So one, just want to clarify, we will be looking at the secondary zones this week, so we're not waiting until September to look at the secondary zones. Some of that discussion has already started. We bifurcated it just to make it a little bit more digestible for the committee, but we'll be looking at those as well this week. As for the financial impact, this is something that we will explore, whether it's the transportation question or the retrofitting of facilities for a pairing option. That is certainly something that we'll explore soon. We wanted to get a little bit further down the road to kind of gauge where the committee was before I tasked Mr. Simmons and others to do all of those analyses. Obviously, they're time consuming with the start of the school year. Our focus has been on day one. So we wanted to get a sense of where folks are generally before we begin that process. But I believe soon we'll be in a position to know what are the different scenarios that make sense to fully cost out. And then as far as the overall timeline, my vision for this going forward, that certainly want to discuss further with the RAC, is that by the September meeting, when we bring everybody back together, we should have a set of options that reflects most of the discussions that have happened and some sense of consensus on some of the key potential ways of going. I think some parts of the city there's a great deal of disagreement. I think in other parts of the city we're actually approaching consensus. And so as I sort of articulated last time around, I would like to see where we are on that spectrum for all parts of the city come that September meeting, and then based on that, articulate what the next steps would be. If we are close to consensus, then I think there is an opportunity to perhaps by October or November bring to the board proposals to consider. If it seems like we are further off, then we might need to extend that process, but I wanted to make sure that we're being responsive to where the committee was. But we will lay out a draft schedule shortly to take us into September and October and November. We'll put some anchors in the ground in terms of some meetings, but we want to maintain some flexibility to be responsive to where the RAC is and to put energy and time around issues that remain to be discussed.
Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. So part of the reason why I think it's important to have a firm schedule is I spent a little bit of time reviewing this process, which is almost in parallel to ours in Henrico. And they are now embarking on a rezoning process that for them will take effect in 2021. And their process looks very different than ours. In addition to the elongated timeline, even their process in terms of bringing the committee and forming the committee. So whereas we have appointed committee members, their process, they had an application process. I believe they received over 300 applications, and then the final committee was then selected by proper, and I believe they made the selection to ensure that there was a good amount of diversity and representation, and there was someone from every school that was represented in their process. So our process looks very different, and I think especially in light that we have appointed members, we need to ensure that that we are doing our due diligence to keep the community informed, what all of the milestones are going to look like, and I do want to reiterate, again, I think that having the plan is critical in terms of the buy-in, and so for me, that means understanding what the numbers are and ensuring that we have put a significant amount of focus on both sides of the river in terms of what those priorities are, and so I just think it's imperative that we do map this out from start to finish, that we identify those times, and we're going to have the public hearing, in every step of the process. I remember several years ago when we went through this, I was a parent, there was a survey, so I think we should design what this whole kit and caboodle is going to look like, so people know what to expect and can have a clear way that they're able to engage in the process.
So, thank you, Ms. Gibson. Just want to remind board members, this is the process that the board agreed to. We started this process in February of this year. Each board member has had the opportunity to appoint representatives from their district. Some of us we have appointed 2, some board members have appointed 3. So this process is what the board agreed to. And we have a timeline, and I think we need to follow the process. We have the community members that are committing their time, their dedication into this process, and I think we need to honor that process, what the board agreed to.
Just want to clarify that all board members appointed the same number of representatives. Just want to make sure that was clear too. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I got carried away. Yes, but I I think we need to honor the process. Next item. Ms. Dorr, I'm sorry.
I have a question for the administration as we think about middle and high schools. Actually, I have two questions and a thought. How do we envision passion for learning impacting the middle and high school research?
It's a great question, and it is a longer discussion. I would say on the high school side, I think we are at least a couple of years away from bringing pieces of that to fruition, given the enormity. And so I think that would be something we'd have to revisit at that time. My hope is that we begin to take steps in that direction on the middle school side in the fall of 20. I don't think it would dramatically affect a lot of the rezoning conversations that we've been having in the short term. I think 3 to 5 years down the road potentially. But I think we have agreed collectively that we need to not just do this once every 10 or so years, but to keep revisiting this question and make modifications throughout the process. But excited to talk more about that this fall once we get past the start of school.
Mr. Young?
Yeah, I'm grateful for that question from my colleague. Just say that was part of the impetus for my open enrollment proposal to address that strategic plan objective or goal.
Ms. Dorr?
I also, and I apologize if I missed this at the last meeting, but I believe at the last rezoning RIC meeting, there were some open questions that the committee had for us as a board that they wanted clarification from us on. Did we have an opportunity? So I recall one of the questions was, are we going to revisit open enrollment as part of this process? Or what is on the table in terms of decisions that need to be made? And I think it would be nice for us as a board to try and get some responses back to the committee. At the last RAC meeting, the committee members were asked to brainstorm things that they needed from us as a board. One of the examples was clarification on, are we revisiting open enrollment at all? My proposal would be that we respond to those so that we get them some additional direction from us as a board.
Yes, and we would very much like the board to weigh in on those questions. I was hoping that we could make our way through this coming week and gather anything else that is bothering us, and then at our next board meeting, present to you what those key questions are and give you some time to think about them and then have a discussion probably at our second meeting in September to really dig into those, and if there are clear directions on some of those things to make sure that that surfaces at that time. But we just wanted to gather, we had a few from that meeting certainly, but I've heard of others that have bubbled up, and so I wanted to give this week's meetings the opportunity to happen and gather those in.
Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate that. I think that's going to be an important part of this process as we continue to refine these plans and understand what parameters we're working with. I would request that we get those questions in advance of our first meeting in September. In light of the fact that this process is continuing to move forward, if there are important questions that we need board feedback on, I'd like to make sure that we can get that input to our RAC members as soon as possible.
And also, I would like to add, as we provide a definitive response to these questions, that we will add that feedback to the website, so for public consumption. Well,
Madam Chair, do we have consensus about the first meeting in September versus the second meeting?
If I may, the first meeting in September is the first day of school. We traditionally try to keep that as a very short and celebratory meeting. However, if the board feels otherwise, we can certainly entertain other agenda items, but that's been the discussion that we've had thus far. Given what a busy day that is for all involved, and what a busy day the second day of school is for all involved as well.
so it sounds like the second meeting in September, and also to take in consideration that some of us are parents and we are filling out forms and getting everything in order for starting the school year. Ms. Gibson?
This parent personally would be happy to make sure we are as productive as possible in that first meeting. So obviously I'm not speaking for all parents, but I think it's important that we get the work done. And I think particularly I brought this up in the last meeting that we do keep looking very we do continue to look at the execution of Dreams for RPS, because the point about the timing for the rollout of Passion for Learning gives me some pause, because we promised that in 2021 we'd be launching one Passion for Learning cluster, which was one high school and one middle school. So I think that I want to make sure that we are looking at the execution and implementation of this plan in a kind of I want to drill down and look at the detail, the timing, so that we are showing the city that we are using those funds with fidelity.
I totally agree that if it's the board consensus for the first meeting or the second meeting in September, then we will proceed. Is there Ms. Marlowe?
Just to speak in favor of the first meeting, if we don't get this kind of feedback until the second meeting in September, that means we won't be able to provide significant feedback until October, and we expect to start seeing options in November. I'm already worried about the speed with which we're trying to handle a lot of these issues, so my hope is that we can get this kind of feedback in front of ourselves as soon as possible, so that we can start mulling over how the board's going to respond. And I'm saying, best case scenario, we respond at the next meeting, which means we're the first meeting in October, and have one or two before we start seeing plans being put in front of us.
Just a point of clarification, I was planning to gather all this and get it to you probably in advance of the September 3rd meeting. It was just, do we want to have that discussion on September 3rd or to have it at the next meeting? That was all. And the administration is glad to follow the rule.
Mr. Baldwin? So, discussion, first meeting or second meeting? So that is the question. Yeah, first, on this side. Okay, first. So the first it is. Okay. Thank you. Next item.
Receive an update on the 2019-2020 SRO data.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, board members. And I'll speak. Doesn't sound like it's on.
update on the SOL assessment pass rates for the 18-19 school year. We saw some of this preliminary data shared both in the media as well as live with cameras last week. Just a few important notes and caveats in terms of looking at this data. This presentation is focused on pass rates on the SOL assessments as well as the BAC assessments, which are for certain students with IEPs, for all test takers for 18-19 over summer, fall, and spring, so for the entire year in all administrations. This year, in 18-19, the state administered new SOL assessments to align with new math standards, and change in those tests impacts the interpretation of our trend data for sure. Anytime that there's a change in the test, you have to take that into consideration as you look over longitudinal data. Just as a reminder, both George Mason Elementary School and Richmond Alternative School include results from a number of students enrolled in the Virginia Virtual Academy, also known as VAVA. This is an entirely online school that RPS serves as the sort of fiscal and local agent, but does not run. This is not a change from previous years. Going forward, we hope to pull that data out of those schools separately, but this requires a significant amount of work and approval, essentially creating separate schools. So we have not yet been able to do that, but anticipate doing that for next year's reporting so that we have a clear and accurate view of George Mason and Richmond Alternative Schools data without that group in there. And then lastly, just as a point of clarification, pass rates presented here are different from what is released in September in terms of accreditation results. While pass rates inform accreditation results, accreditation includes several other factors, including a metric we call the combined rate, which accounts for student growth among other factors. Are there any questions about any of these details before I continue?
Do we know when in September the accreditation ratings will come?
We do not, but I believe it will be early to mid-September. The data in your deck is presented by school cluster. As you know, we have 4 school clusters, 2 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high school cluster. So we presented the data organized by subject and the 3-year trend line. When we look at the total scores across the division, all subjects, all grade levels, and the 3-year pattern of the 5 subject areas, we are seeing a slight decline in 2 and a slight increase in 3. Specifically, we are seeing an increase in writing. We saw an increase in writing, mathematics, and science. Again, marginal, but an increase nonetheless. In terms of going through this data, I'm sorry, I was trying to note that accreditation comes out on September 26th. In terms of this data, I'm not sure if you all had a chance to review it, but I'm happy to go page by page or take general questions related to the data itself, just if it's a lot of information. Is there a preference?
So why don't you go through and give some highlights?
Perfect, okay. So starting with cluster 1, in terms of our reading for English, these are our elementary schools in cluster 1, and you can see the specifics by school last year. So this is year over year pass rates. You'll see that we do have schools, individual schools that in the aggregate do not see an increase, but individual schools we do see some success in terms of growth. Bellevue Elementary, George Mason Elementary, and Westover Hills Elementary are all schools that had a notable increase year over year. Continuing with the same cluster, in the mathematics area, you'll notice that we had many schools achieve increases. Again, a new state test, new standards. While the standards themselves, we believe, are more challenging, we saw increases across, there's a trend line across the state in terms of mathematics, Typically, when a test is rolled out, there's typically an adjustment of cut scores until schools and students get used to that adjustment. But nonetheless, we're still happy that with new standards, that our teachers and students did quite well in mathematics. In particular, I want to call out, there's a couple of schools that had significant gains. We see Woodville Elementary, we see Westover Elementary, and George Mason as well. Elementary, in history for elementary, we saw a pattern of decline in most cases, in all cases, except read in this cluster. We think that is, there are probably two reasons for this. One, history is no longer required as part of accreditation, and I think in the prioritization of reading and math instruction, sometimes history may get lost, but also it's important to note that history standards have also changed, but the state test has not changed to keep up with this changing standards as well.
Dr. If I may, this trend line was similar across the state in history.
Correct.
As was the trend line of the region.
Correct. Thank you. And then for science in this cluster, again, this is an area, elementary science is an area that we believe is holding back several of our schools several of our schools back from ultimately reaching accreditation. This is an area that we improvement division-wide, both at the programmatic level as well as the instructional level. Some of our schools are beginning to look at departmentalization for upper elementary to ensure that science instruction is taught by someone who is credentialed in science. Some of our schools are beginning to experiment with that. Again, a couple of notable increases here, Chimborazo and Westover Hills. So we do know that while the trend line is down, that there are some bright spots, and we certainly will be learning from those schools to figure out what they're doing differently in science. So that's cluster one. That's half of our elementary schools. Cluster two, again, I think you see a similar trend line with reading as you do with cluster one. We saw more evens or declines in this particular cluster, but again, in general, consistent with our overall declines. Okay. Mathematics, and you'll see the trend line of increases generally across the board with a couple of exceptions, where we saw a couple of downward, but for the most part, we saw schools consistently increase their math achievement. Similarly, for history and social science, either flat or down, some exceptions. Swansboro, we saw here, had a significant increase. And again, we'll be taking a look at how Swansboro is, what they are doing uniquely with history to learn from that and share with other elementary schools. And then lastly, elementary science for cluster two. You'll see I think the pattern, you see these mixed patterns. To me, that typically is a sign that our division-wide programming is highly inconsistent, or our division-wide practices are highly inconsistent. So from a program perspective, this is an area where I know that we have to invest in and do a lot more work to support our school and teachers. And the variance that you see for both cluster one and cluster two, I think, speak to some of the science challenges. I think the other piece is, as we built out our schedule for this year, making sure that students are getting consistent science instruction each year. And sometimes the pressure of trying to fit everything in for reading and math, or trying to do interventions, students do not always get consistent science or history instruction K-5. And so by the time they get to 5th grade, there are some gaps. Any questions about elementary school before I move on to middle school?
Pittsburgh. I'm thinking when I meet with
high schools in our district. And I've shared it with, because you know the team at Armstrong is very aggressive with science. That the children aren't being taught last year that they are. If we ever get to the point where we can use our history and our science to teach our reading with the nonfiction piece, because when you look at the actual SOL tests or any assessments that's given here with the critical thinking piece, do we have any programs in place to address the science and address the history in the reading part? And there's a name for that, it's can't right now. Interdisciplinary or whatever. We've talked about it for years, but it will make a tremendous difference. So is there anything on the table regarding curriculum-wise, how we can infuse that as one?
So wholeheartedly agree, and the message that we've given schools is, even if you think you have to teach science and history, at a minimum, infusing historical nonfiction texts in both of those classes. Our history units and curriculum does have authentic primary source reading all the way down to elementary school. So I think that has been infused in the history curriculum. Science is an area that has not been defined, and we are in conversations with several different curriculum partners to figure out if we might be able to do a pilot this year, because we do need to develop a science curriculum. In the meantime, since that does require a process and procurement and prior approval, that is a longer runway for us. But in the meantime, we're looking at partnerships with the James River Association, and we have a set of lead teachers who are building out units for elementary science this year and partnering with them to build in those texts. So I would say we're on our way, but we're not yet where I feel we have a clean, perfect approach. But the direction you've outlined is certainly part of the curriculum process for history and science.
Pittsburgh. Maybe recently stated that history does not count towards the accreditation piece, correct?
That's correct, in the new model.
Right. And we look at the scores from 1 year, anytime we fall from 80% or 60% down to 19%, that means that curriculum is not being touched at all.
Correct.
So what my question was, how do we get to the point where we utilize whatever we have in history for the purpose of reading?
Mm-hmm.
That's because we make those conversations and ask people to do it. We go back to what we're comfortable in doing.
Right.
So I hope we get to the point, I don't hope, we must get to the point whereas we're teaching that factual information. Our children don't know history at all. Very, very, very little. It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing. So I'm not complaining. I'm just trying to think this is something we've been talking about for years.
Right.
And I believe this is an opportunity to make it happen.
One of the things we've done is working with our principal directors and our curriculum director collaborated on the design of the elementary school day, K-5, and outlined the instructional minutes that are minimum required for each content area. We also outlined what needs to happen during that time. And so one of the things that Mr. Hughes and I will be doing is monthly walks with our schools to take a look at how is what we've outlined, and we've communicated that with principals over the last several months, and stepping back and seeing, is this actually happening, or has something come up that is preventing the delivery of the history curriculum from happening for example. So we have it outlined, we need to do it. For history, for science, we need to do more work.
Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'd like to talk about Carver Elementary in particular, and I appreciate getting more details from the administration about what types of remedial efforts have been put into to support Carver over the past year, and I know that there's been staff time and additional specialists assigned to the school and things of that nature. But these numbers are pretty stark to me. And I try not to just judge a school's academic performance by test scores, and of course know that we've got an administration in there that's working really hard. But I also think it's clear to me that if we had certain masked or in academic issues at Carver for as long as we did, that I think it's really important that we invest more resources into Carver in particular to help support those students and those staff. And it's something that's been talked about before. I'd like to have a further discussion about what types of supports we're willing to provide Carver Elementary.
So I definitely agree, and the numbers are stark. I'm also grateful that we have a very clear and accurate sense of just how far, just how much we have to do for our students there. And I am all for providing additional resources. I also think sometimes more effective is not the same as more in general. And so we need to figure out what's working and what's not, because layering on more without fixing the core instruction is one of my biggest concerns, because then the principal is managing all these different components rather than making sure the core instruction during the day is really, really strong. And it's my hypothesis that part of the reason we're seeing these results is we're trying to intervene our way out of mastery, rather than teaching students to mastery and proficiency by giving them access to grade level curriculum. So students come in behind, so then we offer them instruction that is below their grade level, which means they never get a chance to see the grade level instruction. They're then tested on the grade level instruction. So what I would say is we are differentiating, and this is true across the division, and I think it's harder, but we are differentiating down and not scaffolding up for our students. So I'm all about more, but I would like to have a sit down about what is more versus what is effective. And that might be it's probably a combination of those two things, but I believe we do have the resources if we can identify the right strategies. So happy to do that.
Ms. Gibson and Ms. Barlow.
Thank you. I share the sentiment of Mr. Barlow, as I think it's probably well known. I'm not a fan of high stakes testing, particularly to slap a label on a school as being a good school or a bad school. I think though the value of data is that we can take action when we see. And so I do hope that this board, this body, will consider taking some action based on the numbers that we've gotten. The things when I was looking at the data that stood out to me are where we do see significant drops from last year to this year. And those schools, I think certainly Carver, another school is Fairfield Court. I think it's worth noting that those two schools, based on the economic disadvantage numbers that we provide to the DOE, are the two schools with the very highest percentage of students that are economically disadvantaged. I think Fairfield is about 95% of those students are economically disadvantaged, and 93% at Carver. And so I think when we marry what we know about those students in the building, and look at the numbers that we've gotten in terms of testing, it's clear that the need is there. And I don't question that there is opportunity to work more efficiently, but ultimately these schools need more support. I don't know that we necessarily have to limit to those two schools. On the elementary school level, I think Woodville is another building that has, they didn't have substantial drops, but this is also a building that has substantial need in terms of the student body there. The other place where I think I would implore my colleagues to consider is looking at the English language learners, particularly at Huguenot and George Wythe. The drops in terms of scores in those two schools are over 30 points. So the data that's been provided here is very helpful, but I do think it's on us to dig down deeper and look at those various cohorts. And there's really a story there. And so when I see a drop that's substantial as that, I think that it behooves us to take some type of action. And so I think, especially in pertaining to like the discussion of legal services, Since we already have $130,000 that we've talked about saving with legal services, I hope that we're able to keep that savings, because what I want to do is find more money in our existing budget now that we can put towards Woodville, potentially Fairfield Court, Carver Elementary, and George Wythe and Huguenot to support those student groups that need the support. I think, if there's anything that we can do as a body, and we're talking about academic achievement, this is where the budget and academic achievement come together. So I think that we would be remiss not to take action of some type. Thank you.
Mr. Young, Mr. Barlow, and Mr. Young.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it would be great if we could, I certainly think we need to discuss all the schools that Ms. Gibson mentioned, but I would be interested in helping to facilitate a meeting at Carver Elementary to talk through some of those resource issues. It's been clear to me, and just about anyone who walks into that building, that the school is under-resourced. It was clear when I first started going there and there were water fountains missing. It was clear to me when the bathrooms were in the shape they were in. It's clear to me that this space that we call a gym is being used as a gym, that the school is being under-resourced. And I think in some respects, some of those things have been overlooked for years because the school has been associated with high academic achievement. And I'm worried about what's been overlooked on the academic side. And if the stakeholders in that community are asking for more support, then I want to make sure that we are meeting them where they are. So I'd certainly like to have that sit down in the next few weeks.
Mr. Young?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to acknowledge and applaud something that Tracy said, but I'm going to say it a little differently, and if I mischaracterize, these are Jonathan's words, not Tracy's, but SOLs constitute the floor, not the ceiling. Very well said.
A statement. We need to stop using poverty as an excuse that our children cannot learn. We know some of our children come back, they're behind the 8 ball when they start school. I think it's imperative that we make sure we talk about equity. So those resources that's at Fox, be it Mumford, Cary, Blackwell, Oak Grove, Fisher, Huguenot, Open. It is our responsibility to ensure that the administration makes sure that those resources are equitable across the board, regardless of the school. Because living in poverty is not an excuse. And I want us to stop using it as an excuse that our children can't learn, because they can learn. But we just have to make sure that those resources are in place across the board. Because we got quite a few schools. It is our obligation to support the entire district. Ms. Burke and Ms. Barlow.
I know I missed a portion of your presentation, but thank you so very much. When you speak in terms of resources that may be at one school would be totally different at another school, based upon the needs of the population. One size fits all does not work. And until we as a system across the board, not just here in the city of Richmond, to talk about embracing the whole child. I don't care whether you have or don't have, all children need to be embraced fully. We must be mindful as we move forward that what works in one school, George Mason as a parent, compared to Bellevue, may be totally different. Even though both schools have a high poverty rate, but there are other needs. I don't believe that. You on the radio on Friday, Thursday or Friday, I was told this morning, Gary Flower Show, test scores. I'm tired of hearing that when children are in the 3rd grade, the hype is, guess what? That's the beginning of the school prison pipeline. You don't leave by grade 3, then you're done. And guess what? We've spoken and it lives up to our expectations. I've seen children learn how to read in 5th and 6th grade levels. So we must be very mindful. Yes, across the board. There are some schools that have some things better than others. But then I also go back to, because it's within me, to one-room schools. I didn't go to one, my mother taught one, where you have 4 or 5 grade levels. And remember, you learned across the board. And those children all ended up being successful. So math, 5th grade level math was started kindergarten. So children live up to our expectations. Our community lives up to our expectations. But as of this date, I don't believe that because I know what can be done. But we must be mindful as we put that in the universe per se, that we get what we ask for. And so far, the SOLs being the floor, I've shared this at the state level. Let me design the test. Let my children focus design the test, the assessment, and let's see how many other children pull it otherwise. Survival, Ruby Payne. We must be mindful, and we get to the point where it's without our marketing and what we do and what we put out in the media, that there 2 children this past week were listed from the East End. One young lady this morning received a big Lauren Blackwell from Armstrong High School. I haven't heard a word about it. A young man from Franklin Military was all on Sunday's paper. Junior Achievement Award. So we must be mindful of putting out there too what is working. What is working, but we're getting what we're asking.
Ms. Barlow?
I couldn't possibly follow that up, Madam Chair. I'm going to attempt to, on my own peril. In the vein of celebrating what is working, before we leave the elementary level, I would like to ask Dr. Epp to speak about some very encouraging data on the math front from our pilot schools where we piloted a math curriculum this year versus where we did not. So, to you.
Yeah, so we gave schools an option to continue using their current math adoption or to take on a pilot for a new math curricula. And the math curricula is what I would call a soup to nuts, meaning it starts with the full scope of the year, unit by unit, lesson by lesson. It is not a scripted curricula, but it is a fully paced curricula so that teachers aren't hunting for daily lesson plans. Rather, teachers are spending their time internalizing the content, internalizing the information, and then thinking through, how do I make this accessible to my students in particular? And so the schools that piloted this program all went up significantly in math with an average increase of 11 points across those schools compared to the average increase for non-pilot schools. Those schools went up 2, but they went up by 5 points on average. So the schools that utilized the piloted curricula went up twice as much as the schools who did not. Now, we are still in the process of, so we will go through this year formally adopting a math curricula. So schools will, the schools that use that curricula will have the chance to continue to use it, and other schools may opt into that as well. So we're very excited about those promising results in feel that the more we are able to train and support our teachers, the better our students will do. But also we've heard our teachers talk about how excited they are about math and how excited they are about learning a new way to teach math that reflects the new math standards. So that's one example. And then another example, we piloted a reading intervention program at several schools, and at the third, typically it's a K2 program and then a 3-5 program. So you won't see the K2 results here, but reflected in SOL pass rates. But the 3-5 rates, each of those schools that piloted that program, which is corrected reading, advanced significantly and all had gains in reading achievement. So we're also optimistic about the potential of these pilots. Again, I'm a believer in coalition of the willing, and so we are trying to, at this point, we're not mandating anything. We're not mandating either of those yet because we want teachers and principals to feel that they can move forward with the initiatives that are working for their students at this point. The other thing that I would just say, overall, let me be very clear, our students can and will and must be able to, they will succeed in this area in the future. I do believe that it is a matter of expectations alongside the right set of supports, materials, and resources that our teachers deserve to enable strong instruction. And strong instructional materials combined with quality professional development, combined with strong instructional leadership and coaching at the campus level, those three things together work in unison. And so I do not see a strategy in any world where any one thing moves the needle. All things together, I think, have to move the needle. Quality resources aligned to a high bar, professional development that is aligned to that curricula and really puts teachers at the center and they're able to collaborate as professionals. And then third, the instructional coaching and development and creating an environment of coaching at the campus level. Those three things together, I believe, will help us move the needle on this. And I shared with our new teachers today that I challenge them to, if they find themselves using the word can't in reference to our students, like our students can't read or our students can't X, that they pause and say, we have not yet prepared our students to do so. And it is our job to figure out what our students need to be, what they need to be.
Mr. Young?
I just want to publicly convey my gratitude to our CEO at Westover, Allison Alcubie. You've referenced Westover Hills Elementary, and I hope all my colleagues will have an opportunity to spend some time to get to know what Allison is doing there at Westover Hills. And I think the word that would best describe how her team achieved what, and the students achieved what they did this past year is that keyword, expectations.
Dr. L, question. What is the takeaway from this data? We know we're not where we want to be or where we should be because we have raised the bar. So what is your takeaway from this information? What should be the takeaway?
Well, there's so many, and to Ms. Gibson's point, there are so many stories and insights, I think, in data. And so it's hard to distill that into any one thing. I think the takeaway is we have to take a look at what's happening in our classrooms every day and really ask ourselves, teacher, principal, division, instructional specialist, myself, principal directors, curriculum instruction directors, everyone, are we putting work in front of our students that is worthy of their time? Are we giving students access to grade level material or material that is only their instructional level? I believe particularly, I think what we're seeing is because there have been preparation gaps for our students, teachers are trying to reach students where they are, but in doing so, I think are inadvertently not giving them access to the type of instruction they need, the level of instruction. And So I think in trying to help students by saying, if a student is a fifth grader reading on a second grade level, if that fifth grader is likely not getting access to fifth grade level material. And they are getting the teacher and trying to reach the student where they are is spending the majority of time at the second grade level. So what we've asked our schools to do this year is a true balanced literacy approach, which is the literacy curriculum we currently have, that we have not always utilized well or supported well, is a very common and can be a very successful reading block, where students have instruction in the grade level, so they have a text that is at that grade level, fifth grade reading level, and they get instruction in that. And then during small group instruction, if they're reading at a second grade level, they receive that small group support at what we call their instructional level, their second grade level. And so I think what's happening is teachers are receiving students who have not met grade level standards, and it's a compounded effect year over year. And so then we lower the instructional rigor of what students should be exposed to. And then we panic and give them a bunch of worksheets that are test prep or isolated skill prep. And then students sort of are not engaged because that's not interesting, and I wouldn't be engaged either. And in all of that, for reading in particular, we're not putting books in front of students. Our schools are full of books. We have books galore. I think we haven't given our teachers, the guidance and the support and the training to use those resources and tools most effectively with comfort. So if I could distill it down into anything, that would be my big takeaway. And so what that means in terms of action is it is incumbent on us as a school division to provide a true pre-K-12 grade level aligned curricula that year over year shows how our students progress. We know that we have lots of supports. We have tutors, we have pull-outs, we have interventions, we have academic interventionists, we have Title I reading teachers. We spend $9 million on staff, Title I dollars on interventionists and reading coaches. So there are resources. I think we have to take a look and say, are we utilizing these resources in the best way possible? And are we as a division giving our teachers and principals the clearest guidance possible on what instruction should look like? And I guess I'll just, I'll wrap with this, which is, I showed our new teachers a picture of our preschool students, our group of preschool students from Summerhill last year. So, and look at these babies, they've got the world ahead of them. And we did them for 14 years. And I think, and I submitted to our teachers that 14 years cannot ever erase the effects of poverty, but it certainly can ensure that we provide our students an education that prepares them for any career or choice that they want. And so to your earlier point, I think we have to really see to what extent are we allowing our students' circumstances to be a reason to not challenge them versus a call for more support. But I could geek out all day on this, so I'll stop.
Thank you. I think my big takeaway is that beyond the very sobering reality that we have a great deal of work to do, it is this. I would be despondent if we had put in place already all of the things we know must be in place for kids to achieve, and we were getting these results. We have put in place almost none of them. If you break it down, at its most basic, education is about an interaction between a student, a teacher, and the content they're learning. So number one, we have not yet, though we are trying furiously to get in front of our teachers and our kids excellent curriculum. That doesn't exist right now. That's the content. We are trying furiously to
then prepare ourselves to train our teachers on that curriculum so they are prepared to do that work. And we are working furiously to support our students to be ready to engage in that work. Each of those things is enshrined in Dreams for RPS. And so I actually am very optimistic, though with a healthy dose of the challenge ahead, about what we can do, because I believe once we put those pieces in place, we are going to see in these charts what we know our kids are capable of. But we have to build it step by step. We have to get the curricula in place and the PD that goes with the curricula to ensure our teachers can be successful. And all of the school culture work to make sure our kids are ready for the learning when they walk into the classroom. And all of our partnership work with families and community to create a container that supports that learning. And all of the operational work to make sure that kids have a physical learning environment that is conducive to learning. Those are the 5 pillars of the strategic plan. And so I do think Dreams for RPS is a very powerful roadmap to put those core pieces in place. And so while sobering, I'm not happy with these scores at all. Nobody should be. I am optimistic because I know that we have a roadmap that will work if we see it through.
Ms. Gibson and Mr. Young.
Thank you. So I would like to request once again though that I think that the strategic plan has got some global efforts that certainly can help move this needle. But I think we are remiss if we don't look at specific schools that need support. Our average SOL is 56 for reading, and Fairfield Court is not even a quarter. 23% of the students pass the reading SOL. What are we doing? I want to know, what are we doing at Fairfield Court? What are the things that are going to be in place as it relates to Dreams for RPS, as it relates to our Title I funds? I want to know specifically how we can support that one school. I want to know specifically what we can put in place to support Carver Elementary School. And I want to specifically know what we're going to have in place for those English language learners, specifically at Huguenot and George Way. So I motion to help me. What can we do?
I want to do the rest of the stuff first. Okay, let's go to middle school. So cluster 3, middle school. If you take a look at the patterns here, again, either flat, some declines. We did see a slight increase at Elkhart Thompson. And again, we're, in terms of RAS, we need to, again, we need to figure out how much of that is based on our Bravo application or not. But generally, we saw a slight decline in middle school across the board reading. For writing, this is an area where we generally saw increases in a few areas. So we saw some promising, I think we saw promising growth at Binford, and we saw mild growth at Albert Hill, but you'll also see it, and a little bit of growth at MLK. I'll still say, for the most part, we have a fair number of schools where the baseline is significantly behind where we want it, so we definitely need to go in the opposite direction. Mathematics, the trend that we saw at the school division in terms of increases continued in middle school as well, with one exception in terms of increases, but we saw, and here the range of increases, there's a range of increase here, but we did see the pattern of middle school math increase. And I would say our efforts around math instruction in middle school we're significantly improved that this year. We saw, consistent with our elementary results and consistent with the area, history, with the exception of Binford, we saw a decline in history. And again, working with our middle schools to figure out what that is. That explanation is different from middle school, different from the elementary in terms of whether it's being taught how consistently, because we know students have this core content on a regular basis. One note I will make here is the state standards had changed, but the state has not allocated the dollars to adjust the test to reflect the new standards. So we instructed teachers to teach the standard, not teach the old test, because we should be teaching the standards. But this is, you might say, how are we tested on a test that's different than the standards? But that is the case for middle school. Probably marginal differences since this is civics and U.S. civics. But this is my hypothesis for some of the middle school decline, but not all of it. But that would not account for enough decline as significant as going from 43 to 26. That might account for some of the minor decline. Again, science for middle school, we definitely saw some promising increases here. Still, given the inconsistent patterns of science, similar to elementary school, we need to invest more in our science instruction, and we need to develop a full science curricula in middle school. The other is we have schools that are teaching, I think our middle school teachers are teaching different sciences and different sequences. So some of our schools offer biology, some of them offer earth science, and so the 6th and 7th grade courses get combined to fit in kind of essential content. So we're taking a look, just like with math, we are looking at the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade arc, so that students who might be taking a course for high school credit are not losing essential content that would have otherwise been covered in a standard 7th grade or 8th grade course. That's middle school. Any questions or discussion items for middle school? Yes. Ms. Crosby.
This sounds like a little off topic, additional idea. Can you explain the significance of algebra 1, algebra 2? If you master it, but what's the significance of algebra? Why do we need it?
In terms of offering it or testing, just in general.
So this person mentioned, okay, if you don't learn how to read by 3rd grade, it means that you're more likely to go to. I'm just kidding. People say you might be more likely to small. So for algebra, what is this?
Algebra is it's the gateway. Algebra is the gateway course. So students who do not master algebra early on in their secondary career, again, I think there's a difference between, so what I acknowledge in this course that statistics show us patterns, they don't show us foregone ways of being. We can change them. So if we know, for example, that if you're not reading on grade level about 3rd grade, you're 100% more likely to not graduate by the age of 19. That doesn't have to be your destiny. It should be a kick in our pants about what we're going to do for our babies who aren't reading by the end of 3rd grade. But we should be moving aggressively with urgency. Same thing for algebra. If algebra is a gatekeeper course, and then if you don't master algebra by 8th or 9th grade, your chances of having access to college level math are all but gone. And so we've closed out, before a student has even barely begun their high school career, we've closed out a ton of opportunities. That doesn't mean they can't go back and get that, and it doesn't mean we shouldn't try and write the book, close the book. It means we should think, oh my goodness, we better move on this aggressively for any freshmen who have not mastered algebra because the stakes are high for future math. For increasingly, because we have our students from K through 8, we have 9 years, we believe that we can map out a vertical sequence of instruction, and increasingly more and more middle school students are requesting algebra 1. So we do hope over the next 2 years to make Algebra 1 our standard 8th grade course for all students. Some students may accelerate into geometry, which would then we would back map our 7th grade course into a 3 algebra and our 6th grade course into a 6-7 split. We're already doing that anyway for a subset of students. And so our middle school teachers are pulled in lots of different directions because they're teaching at any given point in time 2 or 3 tracks of, 6th grade math, 6th, 7th math, or 6th, 7th, 8th math, if you want to take geometry by 8th grade. So as we are looking to adopt our math curriculum, we want to take that opportunity to align to where almost every student is an algebra by 8th grade. And we think if we give them the preparation, of course our kids can do it. And we really advance, I believe, equity in that way so that they have a whole array of math choices in high school.
I asked that question for a reason. So when I look at I see 2016, 2017, 27, so the next year, 73 with the score. I found the top catch. And the following year, this year, 75 is the score for Algebra 1. And that's something that's not reported. But we've gone from 27 to 75 in the span of 2 years. I want to see that with everything else at MLK. So this tells me, yes, we can. Absolutely. From 27 to 75 in a 2-year span. And hopefully next year we'll go from 75 to 85. But this right here, this Algebra 1 in the course, is to me a very powerful statement. And it's, so I get confused with everything else. So I want to know what we're doing here that we can replicate. Right. And I do feel like that is something that, with MLK, and I said it many times, studies, we have got to be transformative and really think of some very, very different things to do. I have made the goal, I've talked to the superintendent, I've talked to you, I've talked to Mr. Hughes, and I think this is the year we really have to start planning. Because we know, if you look at that 27 to 75, we see what we can do if we're transformative, if we look at things a little differently. Absolutely. And I hope not. I mean, it's not a hope, it's just, we just have to do it. Because we can no longer see the scores that we've seen with MLK and other areas. That's just a non-negotiable. And I agree with my colleague, Ms. Gibson, I agree with my colleague, Ms. Earth, and Mr. Harlow, in terms of, I hear exactly what you're saying, not necessarily giving more resources, but making sure that you're effective with the resources that you have. I get that. But in some cases, I do think definitely giving more resources and drilling down to figure out specifically where those resources, the additional resources, need to go. But definitely would love to see more of a drill down each area, okay, so we're a little weak in the 7th grade, we're strong in the 6th grade, we're, what have you, to get that type of report, and then figure out, the strategy. Yeah. So what is the strategy for not just MLK, but other schools that have these types of scores, okay? And where we need to see significant improvement. We'd love to get that type of report. Definitely the strategies and how this board can help as we move forward.
Just a couple of thoughts. One, all the data down to the very last bit is on the VDOE site. I just want to make sure that it's clear for everybody and for the public. Mm-hmm. We just didn't kind of recreate it all and kill trees, but if there are any specific slices that you would like, thank you. Certainly, we're glad to pull it together. But I do want the public to know you can go down by test and grade and everything on the website, and I think we have a link to that on our website. So that's number one. Number two, I and Mr. Hughes and Dr. Epp will be meeting with every principal this fall to go over their data and to look very extensively at what their plan is to be responsive to it this year and supports that they need or anything else that we can do to help them achieve that. So we have already built that piece in, certainly not just for MLK or Woodville, but for all of our schools, because all of our schools can improve. And then third, I would say is I do think there are things that we can be thoughtful about how we deploy certain central resources. However, we are not in a position at this point of the year to be able to have massive shifts of personnel and whatnot from schools. I just share that because I know there's a great deal of understandable concern about several schools. I wanted to just manage the board and the public and our schools' expectations. We're not in a position where we could suddenly deploy 10 extra teachers to Carver or to MLK or to Fairfield. But we are sitting down, as I said, with each of those schools to look very carefully about how are they going to be responsive to this data and what can we as a school system do that is smart and strategic and, as Dr. Epp said, effective. Because one of the things, as Dr. Epp said, is more is sometimes not better. I think sometimes we forget that a principal is managing all the resources that we're bringing to bear. I'm sure Ms. Burke can share her own reflections on this. And we want to make sure that we are being responsive to the school in its unique setting and doing the work that ultimately develops the capacity at the school site to make sure that the sort of day in, day out instruction gets to the level we want it to be. As Dr. Eck was alluding to, we have some kids who spend more time in intervention than in instruction. And let's set the pyramid upside down. So we just want to make sure as we sit down and have these conversations with each of our schools. So I don't want the board to think that we are not deeply focused on this. The goal is to create a very school-specific response to be as supportive as we can as they go about the work this year, while we do the system-wide things that we know we need to do. Put the curriculum in place, get the PD attached to the curriculum set up so it happens, make sure we're continuing to move forward on the school culture pieces, and so on.
Ms. House will do this work.
Thank you for that, Superintendent Cameras, and I completely understand that. When I say robust report, this is what I mean, not just what you can find here. I'm talking about the correlation. So we see at the 7th grade level, let's say that at a specific school, our scores are not as strong. Let's look at how many new teachers do we have at that school? How many veteran teachers do we have at that school? Let's look at the school climate and culture. How many, the absenteeism? I'm talking about a very holistic report, so that as we think, as principals can identify, these are the areas where I know I'm going to need support. I know at MLK there's a forecast, there might be 300 plus new 6th graders. All right, so we might need some more teachers. That's just kind of obvious, right? Okay. But some other things, just so we can have a very holistic view of our schools, and specifically the schools that where we see some of these scores that we need to improve and hopefully improve in an accelerated way. And so, and that's what I'm asking for. And so as the board, we can say, okay, we know next year we want to spend more money on restorative justice specifically for X, Y, and Z schools to support those schools based on this type of data. We know when we have community partners, we say, hey, you know what, really, this is what we need. We don't necessarily need this, but this is what we need. We need more people, mentors, or we need an extra body in the classroom, or something, just a holistic report so that we can be very intentional and effective.
Pittsburgh. Thinking back, I think everybody has made relevant points. And I'm going back to what Mr. Young always states about the CEOs being within the building. So before we go in and tell them what they're doing or not doing, and I'm not saying we'll do that, but they may already have a solution. Those principals that have returned and that are experienced, they know their families, they know their population, they know their needs. So we always want to find out first. They have their data. So they should already know. This, you said 27%, 75%?
27.
I would have a big party. You have to celebrate. Because we're struggling. In our minds, we're at the bottom. But technically, we're not. We've just brought it to the height. But if we put ourselves, what are we doing in each school that has made that type of gain? That made the 11 points. What are they doing? What are their resources to have something done? And when I say party, I'm not saying anything that it can be ice cream in the afternoon or whatever else. But we need to be mindful of celebrating those steps. I remember celebrating from 9% to 23%. You would have thought we made 100%. But each year we crawled and got a little bit better. But you have to, I don't want our teachers to come back to school. It's very depressing to think that I tried so hard. What happened? So we need to start out with a, what did you do well? Somebody did something well in every school. Somebody did something in every school. And I also want us to be mindful of, number one, our CEOs, as Mr. Yale already stated. Number two, resources. You're right. Are our library books going home, or they can only be kept at school? I know what we said, but what do we do? So we, as administrators, must inspect what we expect. Superintendent said this team is going into the schools. We have to inspect what we expect. Okay? My last thought is VDOE, as they are supporting us. We need to hold them accountable as well. We need to hold them accountable as well. And I have a personal philosophy on that, but I'm not going to say that out public. But we need to hold them responsible also for moving to the next level. Because just as we see things, they've seen it too. So we can't continue to do as we always have done. So I look forward to the dreams for RPS. I look forward to all the men, but I also understand what Skips was saying regarding the fine-tune piece. But I don't want to micromanage. But we get that dashboard in place. You made excellent points. Why did Jonathan fail? Not you, Jonathan. Why did John Brown fail? Today his grades were good. His grades don't match the SOLs. He may have been homeless the night before. He may not have had any food the night before. So all those are, let's be mindful of the expertise that's already in the schools. That's all I'm asking. Thank you. And another thing, if I may, maybe I'm tired, it's 9 o'clock at night. Now the week. I think we turn the air off in here. We say that student achievement is our #1 goal. We've been here since what, 6 o'clock? And here it is at 9 o'clock, we're just talking about instruction. We need to change our agenda. If student achievement is really #1, we need to put the other things behind that. Student achievement should be here when the room is filled. We're talking about the reason why we exist. I'm not talking about test scores, I'm talking about developing children to be lifelong learners. That needs to be, what does this fall under? Administrative business? Well, it shouldn't. Again, I ask that as we, and I would love to be a part of that, we need to match our agenda with all these beautiful charts we have around here. Because right now it's not aligned. So we want our teachers to be aligned, we want our principals to be aligned at this level. And Mr. Cameron stated it well, a principal manages so much, but you can get so caught up on discipline, the water fountains, the rooftop, and whatever else, and then by the time you get down to the part of observing on the class, the day is gone. So I hope before, within the next month or two, that our agenda backs up what's on the Dreams for RPS, and the achievement comes number one. Thank you.
Just on that point, the administration has prepared a calendar for the entire year, which is mapped to Dreams for RPS, which will have detailed programmatic updates on each part of it that we said we were going to do this year, along with updates on the goals that we've been discussing, and other recurring matters. So that is in the works, and we're just finalizing a few things with our board clerk, but excited to bring that to the board shortly.
Ms. Bird, I understand that, and I appreciate that. That's not what I'm saying. I understand the calendar, I think that's great. I appreciate that, and that will help us to keep focused. But we can't continue to talk about education of our students at the very end of each meeting. This, as you would say, this page, unacceptable. If we say our children are number one, and the most important thing we can do is to teach them, but we have the instructional piece at the very end of the agenda. The agenda needs to be flipped. Nobody else here understands that? Don't you understand that? Okay, well, let's just do it. Then I'll serve on that ad hoc committee. I'll do that one. But however it needs to be done, it needs to be changed. I'm not saying it's the administration's job, but our role. Because otherwise, here it is, August, and we're having a conversation. This conversation should have been held with whatever that we had beforehand months ago.
So to that point, as we plan the agenda, we definitely take note of that. Because you're right, student achievement is number one. So that should be first thing, first and foremost. Yes. We get caught up in the minutia, but student achievement has to be the number one thing. And if we don't have any other comments to add to this discussion, we have several other items that we need to discuss so that we can move on. Is this something in additional information? Your comment, question?
So I want to find out if there is board consensus to proceed with the report that Ms. Cosby suggested in terms of looking more specifically. Perhaps we flag certain scenarios like, schools are at kind of double, kind of over a 10-point drop, or schools, certain scenarios where the threshold or the percentage pass rate is less than, say, 40%, as a way of continuing and looking at, in a more robust way at those specific scenarios on a building level.
So, thank you, Ms. Gibson. So the superintendent just articulated those expectations, or with the board, what we expect.
I didn't hear that, I'm sorry. I didn't hear.
Well, we will be looking at multiple data points for every school when we sit down and have these meetings that are coming up, and really looking at data from all 10 of our goals, right? So not just SOLs, but looking at retention rates and looking at attendance rates and suspension rates and everything else. And so, rather than I want to make sure that we don't spend more time creating spreadsheets than we are doing the work. And so if we can use what we're going to use for these meetings as a starting point, I think that would be probably the ideal way to proceed if that would work for the board.
Ms. Cosby?
I'm okay with that, as long as we, get the data, get the information, and there is a report, and that it is more than what we can find on our own. When you look at the PTOD, and just to clarify, and the reason behind it is not to micromanage or anything like that, it's just how do you support. So, if in your conversations, yes, you have the data, but you have anecdotal things from the information to share from each principal, this is what they're saying that they need. That helps us, that informs our budgetary decisions to hopefully accelerate student achievement.
Ms. Dorn?
Maybe as we think about agenda setting, maybe we just have sort of it certainly the data to back up as it's made available, but also just to check in on how these conversations with schools are going. So it's a little bit more casual and it's every meeting, and we're just keeping it top of mind.
And also the data dashboard. We will be given an update where we are with that.
Yeah, so again, we, later tonight, we'll have another conversation about goal setting, so we need to finish all those conversations. That will then serve as the backbone for the data dashboard. Yeah, we need to kind of finish those conversations. All of these things are kind of happening in parallel. We will update accordingly.
So that will drill down to some of the same things that you had mentioned, Ms. Cosby.
Shall I go over high school quickly? Okay. So high school for English reading, you'll see again, we saw some dips across the board with the exception of Franklin, which we saw an increase. I do want to note for reading, one of the changes we made this year was not allowing the preemptive administration of the word keys as a substitute test. It's hard to know to what extent that accounted for the slight dip, but that was a practice that we did end this school year. Our English writing, again, we did see some increases both at John Marshall, Wythe, and Franklin, and again at Wythe and Marshall, I'm particularly excited about this because you can use the substitute test for either reading or writing, and we stopped that, so I'm excited to see some of the growth here in those areas. For mathematics, consistent with growth patterns, less consistent growth across our high schools with mathematics. Again, you're talking about the combined rate of multiple math exams. And so just remember with high school, different than middle or elementary, these results just reflect students that are taking SOL assessed courses. It doesn't necessarily reflect, all the students in a high school around mathematics are all 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. So this would reflect Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. One of the other changes that was made at the high school level this year, which is important to note, is from a testing perspective, is once a student passes an SOL in a certain subject and they've met their verified credit requirement, they are not to test again, even if they are in an SOL tested class. So for example, if a student last year had already tested and passed Algebra 1, the Algebra 1 SOL, even though they were in geometry this year, they would not take the geometry SOL. And that's, in the past, students tested if they were in that course. This year, the testing changed, again, as an attempt to minimize the testing burden on high school students for end of course exams. So that's a little bit of a caveat for high school, is that this only reflects the students who are in the course and who have not already passed an existing math class or science class. Or science has a lot of different information, but in general, that's the rule. I'll tell you about science in just a minute. It's true for history, but this year it's true for history as well. Again, we see a mixed bag, and so what this tells me is this is a combination of a curriculum issue as well as a consistency and instructional quality issue. I see this as both. science, we did see some notable gains in both in Armstrong, John Marshall, and Thomas Jefferson. I will say some of this was the result. We did provide targeted coaching support in science to some of these schools because the schools had indicated that science was their greatest area of additional resources. And we believe that was a smart investment of coaching for those schools. Science is unique because the state rule says you only test once if you passed it. The federal rule says you have to take biology. So if you've taken earth science, the state says you shouldn't take another test. But the feds say you have to take biology. So for science, our students do test. They may end up testing twice if they haven't taken biology first, if that makes sense. It's very confusing and, in the minutia of assessment policy, but it is an important caveat. So that's high school. Any questions or comments about high school? I would just say in closing, I do feel optimistic that we will see achievement results rise as a result of focusing on high quality instruction. So, certainly the majority of our schools, or at least half of our schools, are not even in striking distance of where I think we need to be in terms of representing proficiency on the SOL exams. I believe that with high quality instruction year over year and focused leadership, and really focusing on the initiatives outlined in our strategic plan, we will see progress and growth. And I've communicated, one of the things I've consistently communicated to our principals, our new teachers, and we'll do so with our teachers next week, is it's not about increasing the test scores per se. The work is improving our teaching and learning. And through that work, when we ensure that learning is engaging and exciting and at the right level of instruction that it needs to be, we will see the results will follow. And again, I wholeheartedly agree with all the comments that you all talked about in terms of really digging into the data and analyzing the data to find the bright spots that we can learn from and to find the red alarm areas that we need to have an extra eye towards. But I would say we are still in a place as a division that I see we have sort of largely universal challenges that need to be addressed through stronger system-wide answers like strong curriculum, stronger PD, and stronger instructional coaching and development. Thank you.
Mr. Young.
I just want to say first, thank you. Second, I share your sentiment as it relates to where we're going. I'm more optimistic than I ever have been for RPS. And I agree, I think, with 95% of what's been said around this table this evening. I would point out, at the risk of pointing out an elephant in the room, and it's been addressed by the superintendent, by Ms. Cosby, a couple of folks actually, but it pertains to what you just spoke to, i.e. instruction, and I don't think we adequately inquire of our instructors how much time they actually spend on instruction because of discipline. And the average teacher that I speak to says they spend anywhere between 25 and 50% of the classroom time on discipline. So I recognize I'm not saying anything that's shocking anyone in this room. We knew this, but I just want to belabor the point. And obviously, Dreams for RPS includes a component relevant to that. So I'm most excited for the opportunity to allow all of our students to have an entire class of instruction.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item.
The next item is 5.03, receiving updates on the middle school scheduling.
Hello again. Earlier this year, I presented to you, the board, a set of recommendations and asked for input on priorities for middle school scheduling challenges or issues to solve for this coming school year. And I'm pleased to report that I believe we have solved for those. I would acknowledge that I certainly think that there have been some communication bumps and bumps in terms of what parents understand and consistency in terms of communication across all of our schools. Those are things we're going to continue to work with our principals and middle school counselors to get better at. In partnering with the schools officer and our middle school principal director, we work with our middle schools to ensure that all of our middle school schedules are in compliance with state requirements, in particular around the minimum instructional hours for the 4 academic disciplines of English, math, science, and history. For courses that are offered for high school credit, we validated that all of those are offered in a manner that meet the minimum clock hour requirement, thereby not jeopardizing the awarding of credit for those courses. And we've also met the minimums for PE and health, as well as physical movement made available. One thing about PE and health, it is required for 6th and 7th grade. However, for 8th grade, the state code is the school division should require a program of physical activity with a goal of 150 minutes a week. That's loosely worded, and it can be interpreted in many ways, but in consultation with our colleagues at the Virginia Department of Education, there are specific guidelines that outline what counts and what does not, and how we can track that. So for 8th graders who, we have a number of 8th graders who wish to take, in addition to taking, say, core content for high school electives, such as earth science or algebra 1, they also would like to take 2 electives that are high school credit bearing. And so students who have chosen that path will not have time in their schedule for PE per se, but they will have to meet the physical movement requirement in a different way. And that could be if they're involved in a sport or dance or band, if it's a marching band, or if they get some movement. There are many different ways that students can show that they are engaging in physical activity on a regular basis, and it's our job to just track that and make sure students are doing that. So that's, in terms of compliance with requirements, we feel that, we feel confident that that is in place after multiple reviews of schedules. And then we will do a final, as schedules are always evolving, as former principals know, scheduling is a little bit of a Tetris game. So we will do a final review once schedules are finalized to ensure this is still the case. We do not anticipate any changes to this, but we'll make sure. And then we've also worked to ensure equity of advanced course offerings, Algebra 1, Geometry, Earth Science, or Biology, Spanish 1, and Art 1 across our middle schools. And students at each grade level have the opportunity to take up to 4 electives per year, depending on whether they choose a high school credit-bearing elective. So you can take 4 semester courses or a combination of semester and year-long courses that get you anywhere between 2 and 4 electives over the course of the year. So that is the update on the middle school schedules. Any questions?
Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. So I guess my request would be just to get more detail about specifically what changed in each of the middle school buildings. As a parent of a middle school student, I myself still lack clarity as to whether the classes, are high school classes or not. And when I read, in the presentation that high school classes are available, I'm still not sure exactly what that means.
So schools sent home something called a course request form. And they sent that home before the school year ended. And that course request form outlined the elective choices and courses that students desire to take for high school credit. So that form should indicate that. And if it didn't, I can certainly follow up. I do know that some schools used an outdated form, not the one that we sent. So that might be the reason. But that's typically how that, and again, I think an area for improvement is systematizing communication on the front end to parents and students about the implications of their choices, not just what their choices are, but what those choices mean for future planning. And I think that's certainly an area for improvement.
Items 5.04, receive an update on dreams for RPS goal setting.
Tonight, we're pleased to bring forward two more goals for your consideration. We'll talk through goal 3 because it aligns nicely with the data that Tracy just presented, and then we'll talk briefly about targets for goal 7. So goal 3, which is related to academics, the goal is to increase the proficiency in advanced grades in reading, writing, math, science, and social studies overall and for each subgroup. So specifically for this goal, we wanted to be sure that we were looking at multiple measures that crossed all grade bands. And so without doing too much, still honing in. So you'll see that for grades K through 2, we'll be looking at student reading levels using the PALS assessment. For grades 3 through 8, we will track SOL test pass rates across the 5 subject areas that Tracy just reviewed. And then for 9-12, in addition to SOL end of course exams, we also want to track the percentage of our students for whom College Board considers college and career ready according to PSAT performance. As with all of our goals, we worked to select those measures based on national research. Ms. Cosby, as you talked earlier about algebra, and actually you'll see that when we get to goal 5 in our next meeting, we'll be proposing algebra for the reasons you mentioned, but also Ms. Burke, the end of 3rd grade and why that matters so much. So research there helped us think about PALS measure. There was a study out of Boston where targeted supports helped the school system realize some remarkable gains in ELA and math. And then research that came out of the College Board about how they were determining what college and career ready looked like. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the measure. But let's start with the first one for K2, PALS. So PALS is, it's important to note that PALS is not a standardized test, so it's different than the SOL. PALS is a literacy screener, so it stands for Phonological Awareness Literacy Screener, and it assesses a younger child's knowledge of important literacy concepts. PALS is used in all but one school division across Virginia, which means it also gives us a lot of really great comparison data as we're thinking about setting our targets. We worked with researchers at UVA who specifically do work with PALS to look at PALS data and how it correlates to SOL data. And so what we found is that kids who achieve a score of 50 on the PALS exam in the spring of 1st grade have a 75% likelihood of reaching proficiency on their 3rd grade SOL reading assessment. And so the score of 50 on the PALS exam is different than the benchmark on PALS. So right now, that's a lot of what's reported out as benchmark. That's a far lower bar than this 50, which correlates to 3rd grade reading proficiency. So a couple of notes and caveats about this particular measure. The first is what I just noted here. Benchmark is not the threshold. This is a much higher bar than the threshold. We opted to use results from 1st grade spring exam as the threshold marker for 2 reasons. One, it's a roughly halfway checkpoint between school entry and the 3rd grade SOL, so it's a kind of a good proxy for how we're doing. As well as statewide, it's mandated to take the assessment in the spring of 1st grade, so it would give us, again, really nice comparison data. PALS only measures literacy, so probably recall from the reading of the goal, we want to be looking at more than just literacy. Beginning this year, divisions across the state are required to also use what's called the Virginia Kindergarten Readiness Program, which is going to look at 3 domains: literacy, self-regulation, social skills, and math. And so as we roll that out this year, we'll then be able to have baseline data for math, which we can use moving forward, and we can discuss target setting around what early math would look like once that becomes available. So as we look at the data today, again, we'll only be looking at literacy in this first year for K2. So these are our usual comparison groups. Overall, divisions that are like us with 60% or more economically disadvantaged students is defined by VDOE, and then our neighbors, all with notably lower percentages. So this is data from the 15-16 school year through the 18-19 school year, with RPS on the far left. So let's just, for comparison purposes, let's look at the far right of each group. So this past year, 34% of RPS first graders in the spring PALS assessment were at or above the threshold. Divisions like us, 38%. Our neighbors, so Chesterfield, Hanover, and Henrico, 44%, and then the state overall, 46%.
Michelle?
Yes.
No, it's not good. I'm just surprised because this is what was given at the end of the last meeting.
Well, it's given every year as a spring first grade assessment. Yep.
I'm just surprised to see 34% across the board.
Well, it is a higher, so if people are used to just looking at the PALS data, again, this is a much higher bar than the benchmark. So if you were looking at benchmark, yeah, that's probably why you're thinking there's a drop. The reason we went for the threshold was we had UVA do additional research for us to see what was most closely correlated with proficiency in 3rd grade. And it's not the benchmark, it's this higher threshold. Well, they take the benchmark, that's just, it's a lower bar for.
It's one test, it's just where you draw the line.
Yes, where the.
We're drawing a higher line for this purpose because it is more predictive of whether a child will be reading at grade level. If we just use the benchmark, which is much lower, it is not. The benchmark is an indicator of who needs intervention, not who's on track. And so we asked the UVA folks with PALS folks to say, hey, what is the right line to say, if you're here, we can be confident you're on our way there.
Versus that you need intervention. But your point though is still well taken. The actual gap between RPS and the state is certainly much lower than we look at SOL pathway. So I think there's real opportunity here for early support. So 38% of first graders in RPS scored at or above the 50-point threshold on the PALS assessment. So we propose increasing the proportion of students scoring at this threshold by 12 percentage points over the next 4 years, which would then put us on par with the state and our neighbors. And so you'll see the proposed increase, knowing that change takes time, and if you look at change over the last couple of years, it's, in fact, this past year we had a dip. But you'll also see, as what Jason was talking about earlier, the optimism of things that we put in place for the future, why we propose an increase in that percentage change over time. In terms of times to report data out to you guys, and as Jason mentioned earlier, that proposed board calendar. So we would propose sharing out with the board January, the PALS assessments taken in the fall of first grade, and then we'll be able to report out their spring data over the summer. any questions about PALS, because the next section I think So the next section, you're now pretty familiar with the data.
Oh,
I'm
sorry. Maybe it's yours.
In the spring, when do students take the test? When it's on?
I don't know what month in the spring off the top of my head.
May.
A teacher might be here for
May.
May. Oh. That's the first grade spring. Thank you. All right, so that's our K2 literacy measure. Now we'll take the next grade segment, grade 3 through 8. So SOL tests are the annual assessments, grades 3 through 8. There's also the end of course exams, which are given after taking a specific course. The proficiency and advanced rates range from 400 to 600, with 500 or higher being advanced, and I just call it out as the goal of this speech to advances. I'm going to skip through the next 10 slides or go quickly, only because it's very comparable to the data that Tracy shared, although it's summary level, and it does include the 2 other comparison groups. But you'll see overall statewide rates, divisions that are economically disadvantaged, our neighbors, and us, our data. Before each one, though, I'll just highlight the actual tests that would be included. So for reading, you'll see that between grades 3 through 8, there's a grade-specific test, and then there's an one end-of-course exam called English reading that's taken at some point in high school. This slide here shows you the data over the last 4 years for RPS and then the comparison groups. For writing, you'll note this is going to be obviously a significantly smaller N size with an 8th grade writing test and then 1 end-of-course exam taken at some point in high school. And you'll see our pass rates for the last 4 years. And the far each one is this year's data, as well as the 3 other comparison groups. For history and social sciences, you'll see we have 4th grade Virginia Studies, 8th grade Civic and Economics, 5th and 8th grade. This is that VAP for students with special needs, and then 4 end-of-course exams, Geography, Virginia and U.S. History, and World History 1 and 2. And as we look at the combination of all of those exams, you can see our data compared to our comparison groups. For math, we have grades 3 through 8 as grade level exams, and then 3 end-of-course exams, Algebra 1, 2, and Geometry. And again, you're seeing a pattern here. You can see the data for RPS as well as our comparison groups. For science, we have 2 grade level exams in grade 5 and 8, and then 3 end-of-course exams, biology, chemistry, and earth science. And our data. So if we use the pass rate data at the subject level, our baseline pass rates for each subject area are reading 56%, writing 52%, history, social sciences 55%, math 56%, and science 60%. In terms of reporting out the progress, we'll be able to report out the progress annually as we did today in August when the DOE releases pass rates. But we also do want to use the MAP, the Measures of Academic Progress, which is an interim assessment data for at least reading and math as key performance indicators, and be able to report those out in January and May as a proxy of how we likely or could be doing on SOLs. Okay. So this chart puts on the left side, you'll see at least 17 to 18 data, as well as then baseline. And then the proposed change, we propose increasing our pass rates by 12 percentage points, and then propose 2, 3, 3, 4 percentage point increases over the next 4 years. Walk through the final goal and then take questions. So in addition to considering SOL, we certainly heard from the board in the past that we wanted to have measures outside of the SOL as we were considering what academic success would look like. And so preparing our students for college and career was an important benchmark. And so we're proposing using the SAT suite of assessments, so PSAT, the PSAT, SAT assessments contain 2 big sections, an evidence-based reading and writing and a math section. And while the scale scores of the tests are different, together they can indicate whether or not a student is on track to meet what College Board defines as college and career ready. And so what the College Board has determined is that there are specific benchmark scores in 10th and 11th grade that are predictive of how a student will do in college. And so their research has found that if a student hits these 2 benchmarks in reading and in math, they have a 75% likelihood that they'll get a C or better in a first semester credit-bearing college course in a related subject. So don't need to be in a remedial course and have a very high likelihood of being successful in that course. So we will use, or we're proposing to use that readiness benchmark then as our college readiness benchmark, and those scores are there at the bottom. We don't have this data broken down in our usual 4 comparison groups, but we do have statewide the readiness rate and our readiness rate. Certainly signals we have significant work to do. So last year, 9% of RPS students were college and career ready, according to this benchmark, with the state average being 42%. We did increase 1 percentage point last school year to 10% of students meeting that benchmark. The state increased to 2%. So our baseline then will be 10% of RPS students, according to College Board, are college and career ready in both English and math. And so using comparable targets over the next 4 years, we propose more than doubling the percentage of students who are college and career ready to, unfortunately, it's still an unacceptably low number, but close to 25%. We will be able to report out college and career readiness results annually after we get the October PSAT. We can provide a mid-year update after the March SAT administration as well as a proxy. Stop there on goal 3.
Ms. Gibson?
Thank you. As it pertains to the PSAT, is the quantity of students that are taking the PSAT part of this goal, or is that included in the graduation goal?
Tracy, correct me if I'm wrong, but all students take the PSAT.
Yes, moving forward, historically, there's been mixed participation. I will just say for the state that, but moving forward, this will be a requirement for all students starting in 9th grade. I will say the baseline though is we can't control for those, like in terms of the state baseline, how many students within a division, whether that practice is consistent across other divisions. But here, moving forward, all of our students will.
Thank you.
Let's move on to enrollment. No, that's fine. All right. So goal 7, our goal is to increase student enrollment overall and for each subgroup. So how will we measure enrollment? This one's pretty standard. The Virginia Department of Education collects statistics on the number of students enrolled in public school on September 30th, and this report is called the Fall Membership Report. So we propose using the Fall Membership Report. 2 small caveats about that. All K-12 students are included in that, minus students who might be enrolled in virtual programs, private programs, or who have a disability and are 20 years or older. Those are relatively small N sizes, but can sometimes be reasons why our numbers don't match exactly. And then just another note that fall membership is different than the average daily membership. Average daily membership is calculated in March, and it's the daily membership divided by the number of days of school that are in session so far that year. So as we look at what our fall membership looked like since the 2014-15 school year, you'll see a steady increase over the last 4 years. We did, however, take a small dip in 2018-19, a decrease of about 250 students. So you'll see that the baseline in 18-19 is 24,750 students. Over the next 4 years, we propose increasing student enrollment by 1,500 children, and you'll see the breakdowns of the annual targets over the next 4 years. We'll note that that's aligned with proper projections, but also added on top of that is increases in enrollment based on more families choosing RPS. We'll submit our fall membership report to the BDOE every September, and so we'll be able to report out to the board on our enrollment numbers in the fall.
Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Mr. Dasco. So, with regard to the enrollment numbers, has there been any discussion about comparing the numbers against the school age population in Richmond? If we really want to measure whether families are choosing to send them against RPS? Realizing it may be more challenging to find an exact number for the school age population.
Yeah, so this is a question I asked Mr. Crocker when we started the rezoning process. Roughly what percentage of the school age population in Richmond City is RPS capturing? I can't remember if this was exactly right, but I recall him saying something along the lines of there were approximately 35,000 school-age kids in the Richmond City limits, which would mean we're not capturing about 10,000. I want to investigate that a little bit more, but it's also why we took the estimates of natural growth and then increased them for these estimates as a measure of trying to attract some of those families. Obviously, 1,500 is less than 10,000, but I think this is a multi-year effort. And again, I don't quote me on those numbers, that was to the best of my recollection.
Mr. Barlow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The only thing I take issue with is using the term capturing children for the second that sounds useful.
Embracing them with hugs and great teaching.
words to say, but 1 in 10 of our students are college and career ready. I don't think we really need to say anything more. I'm just grateful for my colleagues and for this administration, because finally we have folks that are not going to fill off road burners. For life of me, I do not know what RPS was doing for a very, very, very long time. That's a very disappointing, depressing statistic.
Thank you. We'll bring the remaining goals to the board in September for final approval. So again, if you have any feedback on these or ones that we've discussed in the over the summer, please feel free to.
Ms. Cosby?
That was my question, yeah, feedback, or you don't necessarily agree with some of the targets.
Sure, please send me. Thank you.
The next item is 5.05, receive an update on staffing.
Good evening again. Since the last board meeting, the 401 teacher vacancies, 363 have been filled as of Thursday, August 15th, moving us to a 91% fill rate, moving us from 80% as of the last board.
If I may add, obviously we are driving towards 100% on day one, and I want to express my appreciation to Ms. Bramble and the talent team for staying focused on this. We continue to be ahead of where we are last year, and I continue to feel confident we will be ahead of where we were last year on day one. Every day counts, and we're working ferociously to fill every last one of those vacancies. I can tell you, the group of new teachers that we have, we got to meet them all this morning. Obviously, we would like to get that number smaller over the coming years so that we can be retaining more of our veteran folks. But if you have to hire new teachers, you want to have excited, energetic, passionate ones, and we had a auditorium full of such educators this morning, and it was truly an inspiration to be with all of them. It was great to have the REA representing, clad in red, of course, and lots of other folks. So I just want to recognize the talent team. Still more work to do, but they have been on this with laser focus. And I also want to recognize our principal directors and our principals who have been great partners, of course, in this work as well.
Thank you.
Next item is item 6, there are no budgetary items. Item 7 is your consent agenda. Under that, we have a request from Mrs. Burke to attend the VSBA annual conference in November at an estimated cost of $552.55. Ms. Owen is also submitting a request for that same conference, same amount. And Ms. Page is donating $200 to Bouchard Middle School for opening school activities for a total of $1,305.
I apologize, Ms.
The store.
I am also requesting $1,000 to the Westwood Playground Neighborhood Association and their new Parks and Rec Center and playground and programs for after school.
We need a motion.
Madam Chair, I move that we accept the requested school board activities.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Burke and seconded by Ms. Gibson to approve the district activity fund request. Any discussion? Call the question.
Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Ms. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
Abstain.
Ms. Cosby?
Yes.
Ms. Burns?
Yes.
Ms. Lord?
Yes.
Ms. Page?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-0. The next item is item 8, other informational items, and for your review on board docs were budget transfers and the crisis plan. The next item is new business.
Ms. Gibson?
Regarding business, we have discussed having a discussion about English language learners and wondering what the timing for that is. And then also, on a related note, wanted to see if that can include, I think, LEDA, the scores for English language learners, so if that could be included in that discussion.
And what priority of the strategic plan does that align with?
Priority one. I will confer with Dr. Appin and see when that will be possible.
Thank you.
All right. If there's no new business, announcements, Ms. Burke?
I'm happy to report, as stated earlier, we collected over 14,000 backpacks out in Hardywood. That was quite an event, 14,063. And in driving around to different schools today, I could see where the backpacks were delivered, wrapped very well. Many thanks to Cold Star, I want to Walmart, UPS, the line, and people are still calling and parents are still asking. So, in the event, I hope we can depend upon Dr. Harris, I know we can't grade it. In case you do get information about a school not having enough because of more students coming in, we're able to take care of that. But thank you so very much. Challenge 12 was absolutely awesome, and they're still addressing that. I had somebody else too.
Ms. Burke can also recognize Mr. Timmy.
Yes.
VCU alumni.
Timmy, he's already got it started for this coming year. He's already got it started, and there's something that's going to really, 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 really be great. I said like 45, really great.
Phenomenal event.
Yes.
All right, since we have no other announcements. All right, seeing that we don't have any other announcements, our meeting is now adjourned. I know you.